Chapter 436. The black cliff was like a gigantic object. It carried an indescribable aura of darkness as it pushed aside the numerous ancient trees and entered everyone's line of sight. In the distance, they could even see a dark purple river flowing out from the bottom of the cliff. It formed a small pool and then flowed into the distance. This river was probably the one that Yin Nuoxing and the others had discovered at the beginning. The aura of darkness is getting stronger and stronger. When they arrived at the foot of the Night God Mountain, Yin Nuoxing could feel the dark energy even more clearly. He could even smell it. It was the same energy as the one in his shadow, but it was slightly different. The aura of the eternal night flame. At this moment, Zi inside his body suddenly cried out in surprise, causing Yin Nuoxing to quiver. He was slightly delighted and then nodded his head. Boom! Under everyone's gaze, Yin Nuoxing raised his right hand high. A ball of light purple flame spewed out from his palm and expanded to several tens of meters in a few breaths' time. Following the appearance of the purple night flame, the temperature of the area increased abruptly, causing everyone to sweat profusely. Even the strange dark mist was expelled completely. Although they were curious about what he was doing, they didn't want to disturb him when they saw him closing his eyes and concentrating fully. They could only retreat a little and come into close contact with the divine flame. Just the scorching heat alone was unbearable for them. When the purple night flame expanded to nearly 300 meters and hung about a foot above Yin Nuoxing's palm, it stopped expanding. Waves of scorching heat rippled through the air like water waves. Everywhere it passed, the scorching heat caused the space to slightly distort. The increasing temperature also forced Yuan Shi and the others to retreat far away. They only felt better after they had retreated 1,000 meters. Due to the appearance of the divine flame, the surrounding mist had dissipated by a lot. Everyone wasn't afraid of being separated. They looked at Yin Nuoxing, who was concentrating peacefully, and looked at each other. With him as the center, they separated slightly and were vigilant of their surroundings. This place wasn't safe. It wouldn't be good if someone disturbed Yin Nuoxing. Of course, they were only worried about the life of the intruder. About 10 minutes later, the substantial wave of fire suddenly disappeared, and the 300-meter wide ball of fire also trembled slightly before slowly shrinking back into Yin Nuoxing's body. Phew! After withdrawing the purple night dark flame, Yin Nuoxing exhaled softly. She raised her head slightly and looked in a certain direction. She couldn't help but smile. What's wrong? Did you find something? Seeing that the divine flame had disappeared and the temperature had dropped, the crowd slowly walked over and asked curiously. Well, there's some things. Yin Nuoxing smiled mysteriously and put her index finger on her lips. Her mysterious look made everyone confused. On the other hand, it was Yuan Shi and Zi Yin who blinked, and then they glanced at each other. A short moment later, they came to a sudden understanding, and they seemed to have understood something. After that, they smiled and nodded without saying anything. After laughing for a while, Yin Nuoxing waved her hand. Light essence once again gushed out from her body, enveloping everyone. Then, her 6 light purple wings slowly unfolded, and an endless amount of wind essence suddenly condensed, lifting everyone up. Let's go. With a hearty laugh, Yin Nuoxing suddenly squatted down. Then, her 6 wings flapped vigorously with an endless amount of wind essence. Her feet also stomped on the ground, bringing everyone up to the Night God Mountain in an instant. Then, she rushed into the mountain range at full speed. The huge black mountain range rapidly retreated below. Wherever the golden light passed, there would be a gust of wind, causing the trees below to sway wildly. The dense fog had already disappeared at this place. Everyone slowly heaved a sigh of relief when their vision cleared. They really had enough of that damn place where they couldn't even see their own fingers when they stretched out their hands. So many people. Just how many wrong paths did we take? Many figures flashed past in the rapidly retreating mountain forest. Those people's strength ranged from immortal level 5 to demon level 4. However, there were at least a few hundred people, and at most a few hundred people. Yin Nuoxing sucked in a breath of cold air. Thinking of this, Yin Nuoxing and Yao Hua looked at each other bitterly. Then they both smiled bitterly. They had rushed so quickly, but in the end, they failed because they took the wrong path. They really couldn't accept it. They really couldn't accept it, this kind of thing. I am not allowed. Allowed. Everyone was also thinking about this matter, but they suddenly heard Yin Nuoxing roar out word by word. Then, they were stunned to see that the flapping six-winged figure in front of them suddenly had countless golden lines flowing through his body. Then, the long, light purple hair that fluttered behind him was suddenly dyed with a golden light. Even his 6 wings had turned golden. His eyes seemed to be burning as they lit up with a resplendent golden light. When everyone saw him like this, they were so frightened that their faces turned pale. Just as they opened their mouths to speak, they saw 3 balls of star power of various colors emerge from Yin Nuoxing's body and condense into 3 rolling balls of energy. The bright golden light element, the dark yellow time energy, and the dark purple night flame. Star, seeing this, everyone's faces turned as white as paper. They could all see that this guy was going to risk his life. Only Qin Yin looked at everyone's pale faces in astonishment. Although she didn't understand what was going to happen, she subconsciously grabbed the wood spirit. Yin Nuoxing let out an angry roar. The golden light that enveloped everyone suddenly elongated into a thin golden ray of light. With a swoosh, it disappeared into the horizon. Vaguely, some tragic screams could be heard, scaring everyone below. When they looked up, they didn't see anything. Whoosh! Suddenly, a violent sound of wind breaking came from the horizon. Then, a golden ray of light cut through space and appeared in their line of sight. The thin golden ray of light gradually thickened, and the golden threads slowly fell off like silk. Even the situation inside could be seen clearly. After persisting for half a minute, the speed of the golden ray of light became slower and slower. The one who broke through the golden ray of light was a figure that looked like a god or a demon with 6 wings. Everyone behind him had their eyes tightly shut and clutched their heads. After another half a minute, that figure finally stopped powerlessly. The 3 balls of energy that were revolving around his body gradually retracted back into his body, and he gradually landed on the ground with everyone. Thud, thud, thud. As soon as his body landed on the ground, Yin Nuoxing staggered forward a few steps until his head hit a big tree. Only then did he stop. When everyone behind him felt that they had landed safely, they slowly opened their eyes and looked at the guy in front of them with a strange gaze. Little Star can actually stop. Last time he played with a meteor crashing to the ground. Yeah, that time when the ship crashed in Lihuan City, it really scared me. Even when I used the light element, I wasn't as violent as him. The elemental power here is very suppressed, and the light element can only be used by 1/10 of its original power. He's still using it so desperately. Crazy guy, he'll probably have to rest for a while. After stopping, everyone patted their chests and had the urge to vomit after surviving a great disaster. Fortunately, this wasn't the first time Yin Nuoxing played with them like this, so it wasn't a big deal. Are you okay? Mu Ling supported Qin Yin with all her might. When she saw that her pretty face, which had just recovered a little bit of color, had turned pale again, she even rolled her eyes and asked with some heartache. Ugh! Hearing these noises, Qin Yin raised her head in discomfort, her chest heaving violently. Then she supported Mu Ling, knelt on the ground, and vomited violently, causing everyone to break out in cold sweat for her. She had to endure such a strong acceleration for the first time. Even Jin Wang and the others couldn't take it, let alone a little girl like her. Aha! I forgot that you were in the car and accidentally drove. How are you? Are you okay? Yin Nuoxing suddenly appeared beside Qin Yin like a ghost and smiled apologetically, giving everyone a fright. Didn't you just run into a tree? You're courting death, aren't you? Qin Yin was panting heavily and didn't have the energy to respond to him. Mu Ling also patted her back with heartache. The former probably vomited everything she ate 2 days ago. Spit it out. You'll feel better after you spit it out. Yin Nuoxing patted her shoulder calmly and said calmly, Vomit your sister. Hearing Yin Nuoxing say this familiar line, everyone was furious and raised their middle fingers in unison. "You bastard, can't you at least give us some time to prepare the next time you drive?" Yuan Shi also spat out fiercely and slapped Yin Nuoxing on the shoulder. After being slapped, Yin Nuoxing's handsome face contorted and he staggered a few steps. Everyone was stunned. Only then did they see that his beautiful light purple hair was now completely white. Cough, cough. Qin Yin, who had vomited for a long time, finally regained her senses. She supported Mu Ling and stood up. She couldn't help but rub her throat, looking very uncomfortable. Her Mei Mao looked straight at Yin Nuoxing. Just when everyone thought that she was going to make things difficult, she said something that made everyone fall to the ground. "So exciting. Let's do it again." His eyes sparkled with stars, causing everyone to fall to the ground. Yin Nuoxing's legs went soft, and he almost knelt down. It seemed that he was someone who liked excitement. Who would have thought that such a heart was hidden under that serene appearance? The god's sacrificial altar was said to be the most mysterious place in the eternal night forest. A god was enshrined there. Some people also said that a god's position was placed there, waiting for the fated person to obtain it. However, this information was from an era ago, and no one knew whether it was true or false. However, there was indeed a strange pressure that only a god, or even a god, had left behind. It was this pressure that made this place the only place in the eternal night forest where there were no demonic beasts. In addition, the god's sacrificial altar was located in the middle of the night god mountain, and there were no demonic beasts to disturb it. Therefore, it was the safest place for many forces to settle down. When I was flying at full speed, I saw that 80% of the people were gathered here, so I wanted to take a look. Yin Nuoxing said when they were about 10 miles away from the god's sacrificial altar. He had recovered a certain amount of strength from where he had just landed. At least his hair wasn't completely white anymore. "We're close to the source of that energy," Qin Yin said with a frown. Everyone was startled. Could it be that the night god mountain was nearby? However, this thought was quickly dispelled. They were walking towards the god sacrificial altar. Qin Yin also said that the energy was getting closer and closer. It seemed that the so-called source of energy wasn't the energy flow of the night god spring, but the strange pressure left behind by the god's sacrificial altar. They thought that they could directly find the night god spring. After approaching the god sacrificial altar, Yin Nuoxing and the others flew for another 10 minutes or so. Then, a huge square suddenly appeared in everyone's sight. When they saw the huge square that had suddenly appeared in the forest, Yin Nuoxing and the rest were stunned. When they clearly saw the densely packed crowd on the square, they suddenly came to a realization. This must be the so-called divine sacrificial altar. The huge square was man-made. Standing at the edge of the square, one's line of sight followed the stairs down. Their eyes swept over the small groups of 3 to 5 people who had formed independent circles. Their arrival also attracted the attention of these people. They were slightly startled, but they shifted their attention away in the blink of an eye. During this period of time, there were constantly teams and experts coming to this place. Although there wasn't such a large group of people, there was nothing strange about it. Looking at the center of the square, Yin Nuoxing discovered that there was a stone platform that was several hundred feet wide and 2 to 3 meters tall. There was also a group of people on the stone platform. However, the number was much smaller than the number below the stone platform. However, the people on the stone platform all had one thing in common. That was, their auras were extremely powerful. Demonic rank 5 seals and immortal rank 9 seals. The gap between the two sides is too big. Slowly withdrawing her spiritual strength, Yin Nuoxing frowned when she clearly sensed the strength of the people on the stone platform. Moreover, some of the demonic rank experts only sat below and didn't climb up. She didn't know if it was because they weren't strong enough or some other reason. "Guyu, he's here too." Looking around the stone platform, Qin Yan's gaze froze at a single spot. Her eyebrows knitted together as the corner of her mouth lifted into a cold arc. Yin Nuoxing was stunned. She glanced at her and followed her gaze. When she saw the person that she was looking at, she immediately came to a realization. That person was the scarred man who had attacked her earlier. The godchild of the sacred weapon divine hall, Guyu. He has mastered the metal element to perfection. It's said that people of the same level shouldn't fight with him with weapons. The weapons in their hands would be disrupted and even be used for other purposes, injuring themselves instead. Yin knitted her eyebrows and said, "Oh, transcendent?" Hearing this, Tai Rui raised her eyebrows and smiled disdainfully. Yin Nuoxing shrugged. One was an ancient inheritance that had studied the metal element for countless years, while the other was a great force that studied weapons. The similarity between the two was that they were proficient in the metal element. As for which one was stronger, it was hard to say without a direct comparison. His eyes only lingered on Guyu for a while, before moving away to the center of the stone platform. In the center, there was an ancient square altar. Thick layers of dust covered the altar, and there was no one within 10 zhang of it. With his extraordinary soul power, Yin Nuoxing could feel that the altar was emitting a little bit of horrifying pressure. Suddenly feeling that something was wrong, Yin Nuoxing was stunned for a moment. She carefully stared at the stone platform and the square altar and frowned. A scene was extracted from her memory. It was the time when they were in the Tana's water god palace. At that time, the god bestowment altar had the same shape as the god sacrificial altar. Could there be some connection between the two? Or is there some secret to this shape? Just as Yin Nuoxing was thinking hard, a pair of eyes slowly shifted over and stared straight at Yin Nuoxing. Chapter 437. Yin Nuoxing pondered for a moment when he felt this gaze. He turned his head slightly and followed the gaze. However, he saw an acquaintance that he did not want to see. The owner of that gaze suddenly parted the corners of his mouth into a crazy arc. A fanatical voice sounded like thunder from the stone platform. Spiritual divine body. Yin Nuoxing, we meet again. The fanatical shout that suddenly sounded from the stone platform attracted some strange gazes. When these gazes glanced at the owner of the shout, they looked at Yin Nuoxing at the edge of the square. The gazes of some people immediately became a little strange. Spiritual divine body? Almost everyone on the central stone platform turned their gazes the moment they heard this name. They fixed their gazes on the periphery. For a moment, the atmosphere of the scene was quite strange. The name Yin Nuoxing could be said to be a household name among the younger generation. It could even be said that he was a mythical figure under the distortion of some people. From a moment he heard the shout that sounded like a fan meeting his idol, no, a fanatical believer meeting a messenger, to the hundreds of gazes that were fixed on him. Only a second had passed. Yin Nuoxing's current posture was a little strange. He crossed his arms and leaned against a tree. His casual action, however, was exceptionally arrogant in the eyes of others. Nightmare, you bastard. The hundreds of gazes that he suddenly received caused Yin Nuoxing to be stunned for a moment. He was not used to being stared at and immediately became furious. The veins on his forehead bulged. He wanted to grab the person who shouted and beat him up. The person who shouted, the person's voice, tone, and tone were the only people he knew who would shout at him in such a crazy manner. Come on, come on, come on. It just so happens that we have not finished fighting last time. Take advantage of this. Take advantage of this. Let's continue. Nightmare laughed foolishly a few times. His body, which was hugging his arms, was trembling and twisting. An almost sickly red color appeared on his face. This caused the surrounding people to be stunned. They hurriedly took a few steps back. Nightmare's appearance was no different from a pervert. This is the pervert that you were talking about? When Yao Hua saw Nightmare's disgusting actions, his entire body trembled. He naturally took a step back and then laughed dryly as he looked at Yin Nuoxing and the other two. Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes. Just as he was about to say something, an evil smile suddenly appeared on Nightmare's face. He waved his hand, and the huge black sickle shot out of his hand. He stomped his foot on the ground, and his body was like a lightning bolt. He broke through space and slashed the huge sickle in his hand. Yin Nuoxing, so annoying. Can't you leave me alone? Facing Mo Yan's sudden attack, Yin Nuashing felt a sharp pain in his head. His right hand made a grabbing motion in front of him, and the nether void sword appeared in his hand. His body also shot forward, and the purple night flame broke out of his body, curling around the giant's sword as he viciously slashed at Mo Yin. Clang! The two huge weapons collided fiercely in the air with the force of 1,000 caddies. The sound waves suddenly arrived, as if a huge bell was rumbling in the sky, causing everyone's ears to ring. Some of the weaker ones even spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. Clang! After another collision, a hurricane of energy suddenly swept out, shaking the forest below into pieces. The sound waves were like thunder rumbling in the sky. Those who were already heavily injured felt the blood in their bodies churning. If it wasn't for the fact that the two of them didn't have any killing intent, just the sound waves alone would have shattered the meridians of experts below Immortal 5. Again. After the two collisions, Nightmare took a few steps back. He was a little shocked. The last time they collided, both sides were evenly matched. This time, his arm was numb and the aura in his body was a little chaotic. However, he still laughed on the surface. I don't have time to fool around with you. Yin Nuashing frowned when he felt the rising fighting spirit in Mo Yin's body. He didn't come here to fight, but to gain experience. He came here to find the eternal night flame. He didn't want to get involved too much with the others. Sigh. The inexplicable frustration in his heart made Yin Nuashing scratch his head in distress. Nightmare didn't have any killing intent, so he couldn't go all out. However, it seemed like he needed to intimidate this battle maniac, Buzz. The right hand holding the nether void sword slowly lowered. Yin Nuashing took a deep breath and clenched his left and right hand. The colorful patterns on his arm lit up. Then, a long silver-blue needle appeared in front of everyone's eyes. As soon as the nether void sword appeared, the energy of heaven and earth surged toward it like a tidal wave. In the end, it even formed a huge whirlpool. After the nether void sword appeared, Yin Nuashing didn't hesitate. He clashed the two swords together and put the nether void sword into the nether void sword. From afar, a long, extremely violent flame was rolling. Terrifying energy spread from his hands. A chaotic and violent energy that could destroy balance slowly formed. Everyone could clearly feel that they couldn't feel the energy of heaven and earth. Wait. If you don't want to fight, then don't fight. It's not too late to fight next time. Don't bring this thing out. Feeling the birth of this extremely violent and chaotic energy, Nightmare's fanaticism was instantly scared away. Only a bitter smile was left on his face. The crowd below also stood up in a panic. Some even ran out of the square. Not fighting anymore. Seeing the crowd scatter like birds and beasts, Yin Nuashing couldn't help but smile. He didn't expect that a little action would make people want to run away like frightened birds. Not fighting anymore. Not fighting anymore. You cheated. We'll fight next time. Hearing this, a trace of bitterness surfaced in Nightmare's heart. Last time, Yin Nuashing's actions had directly shattered 3 eternal weapons into pieces and turned a place like the Ghost Chi Forest into an abyss. Now that he saw Yin Nuashing's actions, let alone fight, he even had the thought of running away. There's a next time? Yin Nuashing sighed. He clenched his hands slightly. The long flame moved even more violently. A terrifying thing gradually formed, spewing flames and lightning. A terrifying pressure descended from the sky, causing everyone's faces to turn pale. Which bastard is flirting with this fiend for no reason? Even if he's tired of living, he shouldn't be courting death like this. We didn't set up such a setting to die with you. Seeing that he still wanted to continue, everyone below suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air and flew out with all their might. Before they left, they even fiercely glanced at Devil Nightmare. In their opinion, if he hadn't started the trouble and just happened to bump into the muzzle of Yin Nua's spear, he wouldn't have caused such a thing. Seeing that Yin Nuashing wasn't going to let him off, Nightmare's face turned ugly. He immediately laughed bitterly and couldn't help but roar. There won't be a next time. Is that enough? Only when he heard that did Yin Nuashing gnawed his head in satisfaction. His hands that were clasped together gradually separated. Immediately, the fusion of the Linghong sword and the Nethervoid sword was stopped. The destructive energy that filled the sky also slowly disappeared. Sensing the disappearance of the energy, everyone exhaled heavily. It was as if they wanted to expel all the shock they had just experienced. They couldn't help but wipe off their cold sweat and pat their chests. Mother Asterisker, if we let you fuse the two divine weapons together, the eternal night forest wouldn't even exist anymore. Great method of deterrence. Seeing the group of people trembling in fear and not even daring to look at Yin Nuo planet, Yuan Shi and the others all gave him a thumbs up. This deterrence would resolve the upcoming battle without shedding a drop of blood. It would save them a lot of effort, and it would also prevent others from finding trouble with them. It could be said to be killing two birds with one stone. After landing on the ground and seeing everyone's actions, Yin Nuoxing shrugged helplessly. I didn't do it on purpose. Who asked him to come up as a springboard? I'll just use him as a deterrent. Come. Stop fooling around. Come take a look at this thing. We can't solve it. You have the godly body of the spiritual receiver. Maybe you can solve this thing. As soon as Yin Nuoxing landed, Nightmare rushed up excitedly. His actions shocked everyone. Just when everyone thought that he was going to sneak up on them, he grabbed Yin Nuoxing's wrist and pulled him along as he spoke. Yuan Shi and the others behind him were dumbfounded. Yin Nuoxing shuddered. What are you trying to do by pulling me along? Come. Make way. Clear a path for me. Mo Yin pulled Yin Nuoxing with one hand and ran straight to the stone platform. He continued to shout loudly, and those who heard this shout all glared at him with displeasure. After a long while, they reluctantly walked to the side and sat down on the stone bench. Towards this devil incarnate, those who were also of the younger generation could not be bothered with him. Yin Nuoxing was awkwardly pulled along by him all the way until they reached the square altar in the center of the stone platform. Only then did Nightmare let go of her. How is it? Is there anything? Yuan Shi and the others, who had jogged all the way, also surrounded the altar. They all looked up at Yin Nuoxing and asked. Some people on the stone platform looked a little unfriendly with the sudden appearance of this large group of people. However, after glancing at Yin Nuoxing and Nightmare, they lowered their heads again. They didn't have the courage to argue with these two lunatics. I haven't seen it yet. Yin Nuoxing shook her head. She lowered her head and blew on the altar. This altar was 3 meters wide and 3 feet tall. Its surface was covered in dust, and there were many traces of being wiped. It should have been left behind by the people in front of them. Her palm brushed across the surface of the altar. A thick layer of dust drifted away, and the appearance of the altar was completely revealed to everyone. This is Yin Nuoxing frowned. On the altar, there was a complicated formation. Furthermore, there were many things that looked like ancient characters and talismans. They were written in between the energy matrices of the formation. On the 4 corners of the altar, there were also 4 similar things. Everyone took a look and frowned. Then they walked around the altar twice, but still couldn't figure out where these things were looking from. Sigh, I don't understand them. Nuoxing, can you understand them? After looking for a while, Yuan Shi shook his head. He wasn't a formation master and didn't learn ancient languages. He couldn't understand these 2 things. Yin Nuoxing also shook her head. The things that looked like ancient characters weren't from the mythological era. Chapter 438. Seeing Yin Nuoxing shake his head, Yuan Shi and the rest sighed in distress. Among them, the one with the most tricks was Yin Nuoxing. If even he couldn't do anything, then they probably couldn't either. Yeah, it can't be. Even you can't figure it out? When Nightmare saw Yin Nuoxing shake his head, he immediately widened his eyes and even used his elbow to poke Yin Nuoxing. He whispered something to Yin Nuoxing, causing the latter to roll his eyes at him. He wasn't an encyclopedia. Some things don't necessarily need to be understood. Yin Nuoxing shook his head and closed his eyes. After a moment, he slowly opened them, and a purplish gold light shot out from his eyes, causing everyone to turn their gazes over. When everyone saw the many tiny arrays floating around his eyes and the pair of purplish gold eyes, they couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. What's up with that pair of eyes? Could it be that he can really solve that array? Purplish gold eyes, so beautiful. I want a pair too. Overestimating himself. A mere immortal stage wants to solve this array. Even a demonic stage array master can't solve it. Just as the evil spirit I started to operate, many voices sounded from the surroundings. Some were filled with anticipation, while others were filled with sneers. This made Yuan Shi and the rest a little unhappy, and they all frowned. Ignoring those voices, Yin Nuoxing stared straight at the array. After the evil spirit eye appeared, the array in his line of sight lit up with spots of light. These spots of light flickered at the outermost edges of the array. When Yin Nuoxing turned his attention over, the spots of light also started to move slightly. However, they didn't move around the array's path, but instead rose into the air, leaving behind a fiery red trail wherever they passed. Seeing that something was strange, Yin Nuoxing was stunned for a moment. Then he focused his attention on observing. The fiery red spots of light rose at an angle to about a foot above the altar before stopping and slowly falling down. Yin Nuoxing looked at the fiery red light spot in confusion. After looking at it for a while, she realized that if the traces left by the light spots were connected, they would form an oval. Only then did she understand. After watching the light spot circling its ellipse for a few times, another light spot slowly rose from another corner of the sacrificial altar. It also drew a flat ellipse in the air, which looked like a mirror image of the first ellipse. Seeing his expression, Xian and the others looked at each other in confusion. Could it be that there was really something in this magic circle? However, they didn't see anything. However, Yin Nuoxing was using her evil spirit eye to look. It was normal for her to be able to see something that they couldn't. Thinking of this, she felt relieved. Just as everyone was watching Yin Nuoxing's expression change between confusion and realization for a long time, the latter's expression suddenly froze and became calm. This made Xian and the others a little confused. In his line of sight, a large cluster of light spots was flying in front of him. They were all moving according to their own trajectories. In the center of the many trajectories, there was a bright cluster of light that emitted a bright light. This seemed to be the center of the many trajectories. It's a bit like the trajectory of celestial bodies. Could it be that it's pointing to the movement of stars? Scratching his head, Yin Nuoxing looked strangely at the cluster of light and the trajectories of the many light spots. This thing that looked like the movement of stars did not change after the cluster of light in the center appeared. It moved repeatedly, and he didn't know what it was trying to tell him. After hesitating for a while, Yin Nuoxing slowly reached out his hand and moved near the cluster of light spots. He stretched out his index finger and gently touched it. Ding! Originally, he thought that his finger would pass through the light spots, but his finger directly touched the trajectory. He also saw that the whole thing trembled because of his touch. It even made a slight ringing sound, which gave him a fright. Seeing him carefully touching something, Xian and the others were still confused. They couldn't see anything. After observing for a while and seeing that there was nothing unusual, Yin Nuoxing nodded. A little suction force was emitted from his palm and gently sucked the large cluster of light onto his palm. Ding ding. As soon as the cluster of light spots landed on his palm, a light ringing sound was heard. When the light spots brushed past his palm, he felt a little sore and itchy. Huh? What's this? Suddenly, Yuan Shi looked at Yin Nuoxing's palm. There, a cluster of light spots gradually appeared on the latter's palm. His shout also attracted the attention of the others. They quickly turned their gazes and looked at Yin Nuoxing. When they saw that there was an extra thing on his palm, they couldn't help but be stunned. This thing wasn't on his palm just now. I took it out from the array. I'm not sure either. Yin Nuoxing shook his head and answered. Array? You really solved it? Hearing this, Yin suddenly laughed and patted him with his palm. He laughed loudly and said, I knew you could do it. Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes. The commotion here also attracted the attention of the others. Instantly, many people looked over in shock, especially when they saw the cluster of light in Yun Nuoxing's palm. Their shock turned into horror. Did he really solve it? Just as everyone was rejoicing and shocked, Yun Nuoxing frowned. There wasn't much change in the surroundings after he took out the object. He looked at the array on the altar with confusion. When he looked at the object in his palm, his frown deepened. So, where's Night God Peak? A faint laugh suddenly rang out, washing away the joy in the place. The discussion stopped abruptly. That's right, where's Night God Peak? What does this have to do with Night God Peak? Yin Nuoxing frowned and turned his head to look at the person who spoke. When he saw the person, he was stunned. This was because the person who spoke was none other than the deity of the sacred weapon Holy Hall. Guyu. Hearing this, Guyu laughed disdainfully. He looked straight at Yun Nuoxing with his black eyes and said, "According to the information I received, Night God Peak is hidden in space under the effect of the boundary of the Eternal Night Forest. Every time the Eternal Night Forest opens, Night God Peak's position will be moved to another location. However, Night God Peak's position has always been within the Night God Mountain. If no one can find it, it will always be sealed in the boundary. Then, no one will be able to obtain the Night God Spring at the peak of the mountain. My clan's elder told me that the only way to find the Night God Peak is to undo the formation on the God's sacrificial altar. This formation will change with the opening of the Eternal Night Forest boundary. Every time we enter, we have to undo it again. Therefore, you didn't solve this array. As for this thing that you created, you can slowly study it after you solve it." At the end of his sentence, Guyu laughed disdainfully. This made Yun Nuoxing feel inexplicably angry. There's such a thing. When everyone heard this news, they all frowned. Almost everyone present had seen this array before, but no one could decipher it. The only one who could do something was Yun Nuoxing. Although no one knew what he had done, he was the only one who had managed to do something after seeing the array. "Oh so?" Yun Nuoxing raised his eyebrows and asked indifferently when he saw the smile on Guyu's face that made him unhappy. "So? You can continue to solve it. What else can you do?" Hearing his question, Guyu couldn't help but laugh. He looked at Yun Nuoxing as if he was looking at an idiot. Yun Nuoxing narrowed his eyes. Under everyone's astonished gazes, he did something that no one expected. He stuffed the thing back into the array, leaving everyone confused. After stuffing the strange thing back, he casually clapped his hands and smiled. "Sorry, I can't solve it. If you're so good, you can do it." Hearing this, everyone was dumbfounded. "Didn't you just create something? Why can't you solve it?" "Huh?" Guyu laughed and stood up. He patted his gray robes and said, "I can't solve it either. You're the only one here who has a clue. Why can't you solve it? Unless you want to monopolize the Night God Spring?" This sentence directly accused Yun Nuoxing of a crime. Yuan Shi and the others frowned. How did this become monopolizing the Night God Spring? Yun Nuoxing smiled and didn't say anything. "That's right, fellow cultivator. We're not as skilled as you and can't solve this array. Why don't you just solve this array? We'll enjoy the Night God Spring together. You can go first." Seeing Yun Nuoxing's evil smile, someone shuddered and quickly said with a smile. He could also tell that Guyu was forcing Yun Nuoxing. Yun Nuoxing glanced at the person who spoke and frowned. He turned back to look at Guyu and narrowed his eyes. He sneered and said word by word, solve. No, solve. It seems that you really do want to monopolize the Night God Spring." Hearing this, Guyu smiled and shook his head. However, anyone could tell that there was a trace of anger in his laughter. "Oh, angry? I don't care if you solve it or not. I'm not in a hurry. What does it have to do with me?" Hearing that laughter, Yun Nuoxing smiled unusually brightly. He almost laughed out loud through gritted teeth, causing everyone to shudder. "First, I'm not in a hurry to find that stupid Night God Spring. You're the ones who are in a hurry, not me. That's not why I came to the Eternal Night Forest. Second, since I'm the only one here who has a way to solve this damn array, don't bullshit me. Get lost and wait on your knees. You can't help me with this, and you dare to give me orders? Third, I'll leave right now. I don't care about the Night God Spring. If any of you have the ability, go ahead. Yin Nuashing stretched out his finger and pointed diagonally at the ground. As soon as he shouted, everyone's expressions turned ugly. After saying those 3 sentences, Yin Nuashing snorted coldly and turned to leave. Xian and the others behind him looked at each other and hurriedly followed. They followed Yin Nuashing's lead. Since he said that they wouldn't look for the night god spring, then they wouldn't look for it. In any case, this trip had made them a little stronger, which was enough. Guyu's high and mighty commanding attitude made them very unhappy. The 3 shouts were like thunder, causing Guyu to tremble all over. His face immediately darkened, and his fists were clenched so tightly that they made cracking sounds. Hey, since you're already here, don't be in a hurry to leave. Why do you care about that Beastra's start? Can't you just treat his words as if they're farts? When Yin Nuashing walked to the edge of the stone platform and was about to walk down, Nightmare was unhappy. He hurriedly ran to his side and muttered, "Why don't I help you beat him up? Calm down and undo the formation. I'll kill that son of a B'Tch. Fellow cultivator devil is right. Mr. Yin, if you have any requests, just let us know. If we can help you undo the formation, we'll definitely do it for you, as long as it's within our power." At this time, someone else chimed in. They also didn't want the only person who could undo the formation to run away. "Hey, someone is glaring at me with the intention of killing me. I don't want to work for such scum." Hearing that, Yin Nuashing glanced behind him and saw Guyu's fierce gaze. He shook his head. "Kid, put away that ugly face of yours. Do you believe that I'll slap you to death? You're useless, and you're still barking at me. Glare again, and I'll throw you out. Apologize to Mr. Yin now, and we'll spare your life." Hearing Yin Nuashing's words, the surrounding people immediately became agitated. They all cursed at Guyu, causing his face to turn green and red. He looked at Yin Nuashing with increasingly fierce eyes, but he didn't dare to make a sound. There were many people present who were stronger than him, and this unexpectedly aroused the anger of the crowd. If he dared to open his mouth and say another word, he would really be thrown out. Originally, he only wanted to urge and force Yin Nuashing to undo the formation as soon as possible. He didn't expect things to turn out like this. Guyu even saw a few Devil Stage powerhouses slowly walking forward. His face instantly turned ashen, and his fists were clenched so tightly that they hurt. After a long while, he squeezed out a few words from between his teeth. "I'm sorry." Seeing that Guyu was deflated, Qinyin couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. The former looked angry out of humiliation, and he didn't have the slightest bit of arrogance from before. Seeing him like this, she felt a little happy in her heart. She still held a grudge against him for attacking her in the forest. Feeling that Guyu's killing intent was slowly fading, Yin Nuashing looked at the dozen or so smiling faces around him, then nodded. He slowly turned around and walked to the front of the altar. His actions caused everyone to heave a sigh of relief. Chapter 439. Yin Nuashing placed his palm gently on the altar and took a deep breath. He lifted his hand slightly, and the ball of light that had just disappeared appeared on his palm once again. Everyone perked up when they saw the ball of light. They quickly sat down and stared at the ball of light without blinking. Phew, Yin Nuashing exhaled. Golden energy flowed out of his arm and poured into the ball of light. He didn't know how to break this formation and could only try it step by step. The golden origin energy poured into the ball of light and caused a change in the ball of light. The ball of light that was originally rotating slowly sped up a lot after the origin energy was poured into it. Then, under the gaze of hundreds of pairs of eyes, it slowly expanded. There's a change. The sudden change made everyone happy. Yin Nuashing also stared at the ball of light in the center with a serious expression. Those light spots grew bigger and bigger, and even their trajectories expanded a lot. In just a few breaths of time, they had already exceeded the range of the square. Moreover, they were still rapidly spreading outwards. In fact, as they spread outwards, there were even many more light spots moving around the huge ball of light in Yin Nuashing's palm. "Come and help me." He was shocked by the origin energy that was disappearing rapidly in his body. He quickly transmitted a message to Xian and the others. When they heard his voice, they couldn't be bothered to look at the beautiful scene. They quickly walked to Yun Nuoxing's side and placed their palms on his shoulders. The 10 or so waves of energy gathered into a massive flow of energy and ferociously poured into Yun Nuoxing's body, causing him to tremble. Feeling his body become filled with energy, he let out a sigh of relief and continued to control the energy to pour into the orb of light. Buzz! The ball of light that was revolving around the ball of light spread rapidly. The number of balls of light increased as the ball of light grew larger. In the end, half of the Night God Mountain was covered by the ball of light. The people on Night God Mountain were startled by the spectacle. They could see the dancing light spots in the air from afar. Their gazes all turned to the center of the spectacle. They all realized something and hurriedly flew in that direction. Soul power spread out along with the light spot. When Yun Nuoxing sensed that no matter how much energy she injected into the light spot, she could not make it expand even a little bit. She knew then that the light spot had expanded to its limit. At this moment, the light spot had already covered the entire Night God Mountain. The vast scene made everyone raise their heads in shock. At this moment, the movement of the dots of light became extremely slow, almost to the point of stopping. The huge dots of light danced in the sky like stars in the sky. Even the thick layer of energy tide was pushed far away by the balls of light. Seeing everyone raise their heads in surprise, Guyu frowned and his face darkened. Just as he was about to say something, he shut his mouth and snorted coldly before sitting back down. It's a star map. Zi saw this scene through Yun Nuoxing's eyes and could not help but exclaim in surprise. Star map. Yun Nuoxing was startled and quickly asked. Zi nodded and explained, this is a record of the movements of the surrounding stars, with the realm of the gods as the center. The ball of light in the center should be the realm of the gods, and the ones outside should be the many stars in the starfield. Hearing that, Yun Nuoxing also opened her eyes wide and looked carefully. The rotating light spots in the sky varied in size and brightness. They really were like stars in the night sky. Night God Mountain, Night God, Eternal Night Forest, Night God Spring. Suddenly, Zi pinched her chin and muttered to herself. She seemed to have thought of something, causing Yun Nuoxing to hold her breath as she waited for her to say something useful. I can't remember, but if you stuff that ball of light into the engraved formation, the Night God Mountain should be able to come out. A moment later, Zi stuck out her little tongue and laughed, causing Yun Nuoxing to almost fall over. Yun Nuoxing was speechless as she looked at Ziyi, who shrugged cutely. She nodded in annoyance and held the huge ball of light with both hands as she slowly moved it near the altar. When she looked at the altar, she was stunned. The originally dim altar lit up with an unusually bright light at this moment. The formation lines and ancient words on it seemed to come alive as they slowly squirmed. Yun Nuoxing wrinkled her nose. There was no such change just now, but she did not think too much about it now. However, when she saw the size of the ball of light, she was stunned again. It's so big. How we stuff it in? Yun Nuoxing was a little dumbfounded when she saw the difference in size between the two. Aya, just stuff it in. Zi smiled and waved her hand. Hearing that, Yun Nuoxing continued to move the ball of light downward suspiciously. Just when the ball of light touched the altar and she thought she would see the ball of light pass through the altar seemed to have a suction force that sucked the ball of light in. Seeing the ball of light being sucked into the formation, Yun Nuoxing hurriedly let go of her hand and stared at the huge ball of light. She watched as it was completely sucked into the formation and disappeared. The formation on the altar also gradually calmed down. It's gone? After the ball of light completely entered the formation, Yun Nuoxing raised her head and saw that the surroundings were still calm. The ball of light in the sky was still hanging high in the sky. She could not help but be stunned. Why was there no change at all? Boom! Just when Yun Nuoxing thought that her method was wrong, a loud boom suddenly exploded like a shocking thunder, causing the ground to tremble a few times. Everyone lost their footing and was directly thrown to the ground, forcing those who were intoxicated by the scene in the sky to regain their senses. What the hell? Why did it suddenly shake? What's going on? At the same time, many cursing voices could be heard. However, before anyone could stand up, an even more intense tremor came from afar. Boom! The entire ground was shaking as if there was a sudden earthquake. It caused those who wanted to get up to quickly lie down on the ground. Their vision was blurry and trembling. They could not even see clearly what was in front of them. The sudden tremor was accompanied by an enormous pressure that descended from the sky. Everyone was shocked to find that the energy in their bodies could not leave their bodies. It was as if their cultivation had been sealed. They could not even use the slightest bit of strength. Yin Nuashing, who was also under this pressure, was shocked to discover that the silver-blue zither in her heart was suddenly vibrating at a high frequency, as if it was going to break free at any moment. Seeing the strange movements of the swirling dragon zither, Yin Nuashing clutched her chest in shock. The swirling dragon zither would not have such an automatic defensive action unless it was under the pressure of a deity. The deterrence of a deity. Quick, use the swirling dragon zither to protect everyone around you. Seeing the strange movements of the swirling dragon zither, Z immediately sucked in a breath of cold air and shouted in a panic. Only a deity could make a God's Park weapon react. Yin Nuashing was just about to ask how to protect them when a layer of silver-blue light suddenly surged from his body and enveloped him. Instantly, the palpitating feeling gradually disappeared. Gritting her teeth, Yin Nuashing hurriedly reached out and grabbed Zian. Then, to her delight, she discovered that the layer of silver-blue light followed her arm and extended to her body. Little star, the sudden appearance of the silver-blue light stunned Zian. She hurriedly turned around and was stunned when she saw his serious expression. Quick, everyone, squeeze over here. Quick. Without having time to answer Zian's doubts, Yin Nuashing pulled her into his arms. With a flick of her right hand, a golden chain shot out from her sleeve and wrapped around Yuan Shi and the others, who had yet to react. The sudden appearance of the chain around their waists startled everyone. Before they could react, the silver-blue light surged along the chain and into their bodies. Then, everyone reacted and heard a shout. Before they could ask anything, they hurriedly rushed toward Yin Nuashing. Looking left and right, Yin Nuashing saw Mo Yin squatting on the ground as though he was facing a great enemy. Yin Nuashing frowned. However, he still threw out a chain and pulled Mo Yin over under Yin Nuashing's surprised gaze. When everyone gathered together, the silver-blue light slowly wriggled and turned into a thin layer of silver-blue barrier in front of Yin Nuashing and the others. Boom! Crack! The moment the barrier formed, the entire ground shook violently. It was as if the world was about to be destroyed. Those with sharp eyes could even see cracks in space. Buzz! A soft buzzing sound pierced through Yin Nuashing's eardrums. She raised her head abruptly. The star-like light spots in the sky suddenly vibrated at an extremely high frequency. She didn't know if it was because her eyes were playing tricks on her, but the brilliant light made it seem as if a dozen suns had suddenly appeared in the sky. Then, boom! Tens of thousands of specks of light suddenly expanded before exploding. Hundreds of thousands of high-frequency shock waves descended from the sky and crashed into the night god mountain. The entire mountain range shook violently as a result. Outside the mountain range, the dark mist and forest within a 500-kilometer radius were almost instantly annihilated. The drifting smoke and dust enveloped the entire night god mountain. After the shock waves passed, the entire world quieted down. Buzz, the energy tide floating on top of the night god mountain, was also completely destroyed by the shock wave. What appeared next was a dazzling starry sky. Under the starry sky, an abnormally tall mountain appeared in his line of sight, and there were crackling thunderbolts lingering around it. The mountain was tens of thousands of feet wide, and its height reached the sky. Just like the night god mountain, it was dark in color. On the precipitous mountain walls, one could see many uneven areas and many huge rocks jutting out of the mountain. The higher one went, the sharper the mountain peak. However, one couldn't see how tall it was. It was like a pillar supporting the sky. Night God Mountain. Although the Night God Mountain suddenly appeared in front of everyone, it was unusually quiet. The entire God's offering altar fell into an eerie silence. A gentle breeze blew the scattered dust away, revealing the situation on the God's offering altar. In a huge square, hundreds of people were lying on the ground. In an instant, it was as if a pile of corpses had appeared. If there was a bit more of the smell of blood, it would be more realistic. However, the chests of the people among them were still rising and falling slightly. It seemed like they had only fainted. On the stone platform in the center, a silver-blue barrier stood tall, and some light flowed on its surface. The barrier lasted for a few minutes, then slowly dissipated. Inside the barrier, more than 10 figures were squeezed together, and they seemed to have fainted as well. A low moan quietly sounded. Turning his gaze, he saw a black figure slowly sit up. There was a petite figure curled up in his arms, and he was slightly taken aback. "Xian, wake up." Yin Nuoxing gently called out to Xian as she placed her palm on her shoulder and shook her gently. A stream of energy flowed into her body through her palm. After carefully circulating around her body, she heaved a sigh of relief when she found that there was no problem and that she had only fainted. "Yuan Shi, wake up." Patting Yuan Shi, who was lying beside her, Yin Nuoxing hurriedly called out to him. "Wood Spirit, Jining, Wuji, Nightmare." She called out their names one by one, but not a single person woke up. She didn't know how much of a shock they had suffered. Moreover, Yin Nuoxing was shocked when she saw the crisscrossing corpses in the square. "So no one died?" Scratching her head, Yin Nuoxing was a little puzzled. The shock wave that contained the divine right had even caused the swirling zither to act on its own. She didn't expect that no one would die. That is, looking around, she saw a huge pillar suddenly appear in the distance. She couldn't help but be stunned. She quickly opened her eyes and even opened her evil spirit eye. She remembered that there was definitely no such pillar just now. After using her evil spirit eye for a moment and confirming that it wasn't an illusion, she heaved a sigh of relief. Then, she suddenly thought of something and muttered in surprise. Night God Peak. Chapter 440. I spent so much effort to summon Night God Peak, but Yin Nuoxing was slightly delighted when he saw Night God Peak. However, when he lowered his head and saw that everyone was sleeping soundly, he couldn't help but frown. It wasn't easy to summon them, but they were all unconscious. What should he do? Just as Yin Nuoxing was about to carry everyone up by himself, a soft moan suddenly sounded out from his chest, causing Yin Nuoxing to be stunned. He hurriedly lowered his head and saw that Xian's slender eyebrows were slowly trembling. "Xian, wake up." Yin Nuoxing was slightly delighted when he saw this. He quickly lowered his head and called out to her softly. He even patted her shoulder gently. As if she had heard the call, Xian's jade-like hands trembled slightly. Her eyes also struggled to roll up her eyelids. With great difficulty, she opened her eyes. Her deep purple eyes were still filled with confusion. She did not know what had happened. "Thank God, at least one of us is awake." Yin Nuoxing heaved a sigh of relief when he saw her open her eyes. His body relaxed as a result. He even wiped the cold sweat off his forehead with his right hand. Xian saw him heave a sigh of relief as soon as she opened her eyes. She blinked her Mei Mao and turned her head slightly. When she saw the people lying on the ground, she was also stunned for a moment like Yin Nuoxing. Then, she turned her head and looked at Yin Nuoxing. She murmured, "What happened just now?" Yin Nuoxing said with a smile, "The shock wave formed by the stars contained divine power. The swirling zither automatically defended itself. I pulled you all in, but I didn't expect that you would still faint. However, no one was hurt. They just fainted. Don't worry." After he finished speaking, he finally blushed when he saw their postures. He coughed dryly and was about to help Xian stand up when the latter suddenly asked, "Everyone fainted?" Mei Mao was still staring at his eyes, as if she didn't believe him. "Yes, I did faint. I was thinking about how to move Yuan Shi and the others up to Night God Peak. Just a moment ago, Night." Yun Nuashing nodded with a red face and pointed in the direction of Night God Peak. Before she could finish speaking, she saw a pretty face rapidly magnifying in her line of sight. Ugh! Yun Nuashing's eyes suddenly widened. His lips touched something soft, causing his head to explode with a bang. His outstretched hand froze in midair, and he even felt a little dizzy. He almost fainted on the ground like Yuan Shi and the others. We haven't had any time to be alone lately. After a gentle kiss, Xian reluctantly let go of Yun Nuashing's mouth. She leaned her head on his shoulder and even rubbed against him a few times before she murmured. Ever since Yuan Shi followed them on the road, she hadn't had much time to be alone with Yun Nuashing. Although she still had Ming with her at that time, this little girl seemed to have done a few good deeds. Is this why you sneaked an attack on me? Yun Nuashing opened her mouth and wanted to say this, but her throat was numb. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't make a sound. Her cheeks twitched, and in the end, she could only laugh bitterly. To him, there was no time to be alone with her. She didn't care about Ming beside her, but he cared. Moreover, there was still two people in his body. He lowered his head and saw Xian's intoxicated expression. He didn't want to disturb her, so he shook his head and didn't say anything. He just let her fingers intertwine with his. He seemed to have gotten used to it and was already obedient to whatever she did. It was rare that Zai didn't say anything and didn't urge him to hurry to the Night God Spring. After a while, Yun Nuashing took a deep breath and stroked Xian's head with her left hand. Her soft, long hair slid down. After a while, she said softly, "Little girl, let's go to the Night God Spring first." Hearing this, Xian opened Mei Mao's eyes. She raised her head and looked into the pair of light purple eyes. She smiled gently and nodded. Seeing this, Yun Nuashing also smiled and helped her stand up. He turned around and looked at the group of people lying on the ground. He scratched his head and nodded. His 6 wings slowly spread until they were about 10 feet wide. Endless wind elements gathered from afar. With the disappearance of the godly right shockwave, the suppressed power also recovered. Yun Nuashing also breathed a sigh of relief. He thought that he would have to climb the Night God Peak. If he really had to climb that mountain, he definitely wouldn't have wanted to few. The wind elements gathered around him. Yun Nuashing exhaled softly. With a thought, the wind elements spread out and carried Yuan Shi, Jining, and the others. He even included Nightmare. Xian looked at the last passenger in astonishment. She didn't know why she had to bring him along. Yeah, I don't know why either. Maybe it's because he's fighting for justice for me, Yun Nuashing said as he spread his hands. Xian shrugged and smiled faintly. Yun Nuashing was a little worried when he turned around and looked at the people being carried by the wind elements. He was afraid that they would fall. After thinking for a while, he shot out a dozen golden chains from under his windbreaker and wrapped them around everyone. Only then did he nod. Yun Nuashing turned around and looked at Xian, who was looking at him with a pair of moving Mei Mao eyes that seemed to be able to speak. He was stunned. A thought appeared in his mind, and his face turned slightly red. Yun Nuashing nodded and took a deep breath. Under Xian's astonished and shy gaze, he stiffly picked her up in a princess carry. He even said in a trembling voice, "Let's go, princess." Xian couldn't help but laugh when she heard this. She nodded and hugged Yun Nuashing's neck with her lily-white hands. She pressed her cherry lips against Yun Nuashing's ear and murmured, "Let's go, my prince." Gentle fragrance blew past his ear, and Yun Nuashing's body trembled. Especially when she added the word my. His face turned even redder. He kept asking himself, "Did I do something wrong?" Puffed. "Little star, you actually took the initiative." Oh, Zai finally couldn't help but burst out laughing when she heard that self-questioning that sounded almost remorseful. Yun Nuashing rolled his eyes. He coughed dryly and hurriedly led everyone to Night God Peak. As for the others, he didn't have the energy. Whether or not they could catch up before the Eternal Night Forest closed would depend on their own luck. In any case, they were going to leave first. The fierce wind stirred up by the 6-winged wings blew the surrounding trees askew. A group of figures flew through the air close to the forest. The air was filled with dazzling golden specks of light. They dissipated not long after appearing in the air. Every time a speck of light disappeared, a weak speck of light would take its place. Rumble. The fierce winds stirred up by the six-winged wings were accompanied by bursts of thunder. The five elements filled the six-winged wings. Every time the wings flapped, the elements in the air would churn slightly and create a series of sonic booms. The faint power of time circled around his body, disrupting the energy that was oppressing him. Sensing the increasingly weak elemental power, Yun Nuashing frowned. The usable elemental energy is getting weaker and weaker. I can't even use the light element. Yun Nuashing took a deep breath and gritted his teeth. He flapped his six-winged wings, causing the fierce winds to push his body and push him far away. His rapidly flashing figure suddenly stopped at the foot of Night God Peak. He stretched his six-winged wings to their maximum extent and then flapped them down fiercely. Boom! Under the effect of the six-winged wings, the compressed air suddenly exploded beneath his feet. Yun Nuashing and the others flew into the sky like a cannonball. The vibrations in the air even caused cracks to appear in the space. Even the forest below couldn't withstand the force and snapped in half. As soon as he approached Night God Peak, Yun Nuashing sensed that his connection with the light element had been severed. He was slightly shocked, but he didn't think too much about it. He turned his head and looked behind him. The ground was already far away from them. He sighed softly. He turned his gaze to the front. A galaxy hung high in the sky. It was eternal and brilliant. Billions of stars sparkled under the night sky. Where did that galaxy come from? And where did it flow to? Xian raised his head and looked at him. His eyes reflected the deep light of the stars. He also turned his head and looked at the sky. The boundless galaxy was still beautiful under the night sky. However, there was something different about it. It's not, Yun Nuashing murmured. Xian turned his head in confusion. What's not? Yun Nuashing shook his head. He pointed at the galaxy in the sky and said, "This galaxy isn't the one I usually see. I've never seen this galaxy in the night sky." Xian was stunned when she heard this. She looked at the river of stars in the sky before turning her head to look at Chun-Shi. Chun-Shi didn't seem to be joking, so she couldn't help but support her forehead with her hand. Exactly how much do you like to look at the starry sky to be able to notice that a change has occurred in this practically unchanging and almost eternal river of stars? This isn't the galaxy we've stayed in for more than 10 years. Hearing this, Ziyin felt that she had really lost him. Although she followed his temperament and liked to gaze at the Milky Way with him when he raised his head to look at it, she actually didn't pay much attention to it. Well, only an idiot like you can detect the abnormality of this galaxy. Zai's helpless voice rang out in her mind. Yun Nuashing rolled her eyes. Is it wrong that I'm used to looking at the stars? This is indeed not the eternal starry sky. This starry sky is the starry sky of the past. Or rather, it should be said that this is the place of the past. The night god Peak was still here. In the spiritual world, Zai sat on a chair. She rested her chin on her hand and played with a strand of hair in boredom. Question, I don't understand. Sitting across the table, Yun Nuashing raised his hand and said with a smile. Zai rolled her eyes. She raised her teacup and took a sip. She sighed and said, when the night god Peak was still on the night god mountain, this state was engraved in a formation. Along with it, this galaxy was also engraved. When the formation was activated, I sensed the power of time and space. It was a formation weaved by two primordial powers. I'm guessing that the night god Peak collapsed a long time ago for some reason. What stands before us now is the former night god Peak. Well, I don't know the exact reason either. Z took a sip of tea and slowly finished his explanation. After listening for a long time, Yun Nuashing still had a dumbfounded expression on his face. It was only when Z used her jade finger to poke his forehead that he came back to his senses and muttered, "There's actually such a thing, but you don't have to worry about the night god spring. There's an extremely condensed energy on it. I can sense it." Zai smiled as she retracted her hand. "No, I'm not worried at all." Yun Nuashing rolled her eyes. "Didn't he say he didn't care at all? I think you should still be worried." Zai stirred her teacup in boredom. She said with a faint smile, The night god spring is formed from extremely condensed energy. It's formed at night, or in other words, from energy that leans toward darkness. It has the effect of helping people break through bottlenecks, including the barrier that's troubling you. Chapter 441. The breakthrough barrier was an expansion of capacity due to the oversaturation of energy. Breaking through the barrier required energy several times higher than the current level. Yun Nuashing carried several divine rank and profound arts. The power of the stars in his body had been condensed into a crystalline state, and he also had the protection of the purple night flame. His cultivation speed was already slower by a large margin, and now he was unlucky enough to encounter a breakthrough barrier. It could be said that the energy required was increasing rapidly in a straight line. According to his and Purple Knight's estimation, the energy required for him to advance from the 51st Immortal Transformation Stage to the 12th Immortal Transformation Stage was estimated to be enough for an Immortal 6th Immortal to advance to the Immortal 9th Immortal Transformation Stage in one go. When the results of the deduction came out, he was almost scared to the point of insanity. After soaking in the diluted night god spring, Xian, Yuan Shi, and the others had all advanced to the second Immortal Transformation Stage. However, Yin Nuashing's body did not move at all. It was like throwing a stone into a bottomless pit. No matter how long he waited, there was no response. "Are you sure?" Therefore, when Yin Nuashing heard Purple Knight say that the night god spring could help him break through the barrier, his eyes lit up with a frightening light, causing Purple Knight's jade-like hand to pause while stirring the teacup. "When have I ever lied to you?" Purple Knight put down the spoon and rolled his eyes at him. "How would I know?" Yin Nuashing muttered. His voice was so soft that only he could hear it. Yin Nuashing's chaotic thoughts lasted for a while before he came back to his senses. He blinked a few times, but his line of sight was still the unfamiliar starry sky and the huge mountain peak in front of him. Because he was afraid of suddenly crashing into a rock protruding from the mountain wall, Yin Nuashing did not fly close to the night god peak. He kept a distance and stared at the distant sky, but he could not see the peak of the night god peak. When he turned around, Yuan Shi and the others were still unconscious. The surging wind elements and golden chains dragged them along as they followed Yin Nuashing. His gaze swept past the dozen or so people behind him and looked down. He had no idea how long they had been flying, but the ground had long disappeared from his sight. Even the god of Night Mountain had shrunk to the size of a grain of rice. In the distance, there was a dense, dark fog. He did not know what the engraved place was like under the cover of the fog. In the sky, the energy tide had long been dispersed after the magic circle was fully activated. As for the fog, perhaps it had existed since long ago. In the cloudless sky, there was only a dim golden light speeding along a black stone pillar. The fierce wind had turned into a substance, spiraling high up in the sky. If anyone saw this, they would inevitably gasp in amazement. Only when the wind element was compressed to a certain extent would such a scene appear. Thousands of miles up in the sky, the air gradually thinned. He took small breaths and spat out a layer of white frost. Yin Nuashing was also sensitive enough to feel that the surrounding air had become much thinner. He did not know how high this place was. However, even at such a height, he could not see where the peak of the god of Night Mountain was. Only when he saw that it was gradually thinning did he know that he was flying towards the peak. The energy barrier of the Nether Void Sword had long been activated. The bone-piercing cold wind blew past his ears, causing his cheeks to hurt. However, he still did his best to protect the person in his arms. As the cold wind blew past, Xian buried her face in Yun Nuashing's chest. She only felt that it was very warm, without the slightest bit of coldness. "It's already beyond the height that I can fly at." After a long time, Yin Nuashing suddenly flew onto a huge platform formed by protruding rocks on the mountain wall. As soon as he stabilized himself, he trembled. His 6 wings curled up weakly. Within the range of his perception, the wind element had become so thin that it was negligible. In other words, Even with the help of his 6 demonic wings' powerful perception, he could only reach this height. Looking up at the sky, he did not know how far he was from the peak. When he looked down, he could not see the scene below. He could only see the fog in the distance. The road ahead is probably going to have to climb. After taking in deep breaths for a while, Yun Nuashing wiped away his sweat. He looked at the night god peak that he still could not see the peak. He could not help but curse. Damn it, what kind of lousy peak is this? Why is it so high? Little Xingxing, put me down. I'll go with you. Ziyin gently caressed Yun Nuashing's face with her jade-like hands as she shook her head and gently said. Hearing this, Yun Nuashing lowered his head and looked at her. However, he smiled and shook his head. It's fine. After saying that, he did not wait for Ziyin to resist. He waved the golden chain behind him and slowly squatted down. A moment later, he suddenly kicked off. His body transformed into a black arrow and shot straight into the sky. His 6 wings slowly hugged in front of him, completely covering Ziyin. Without the support of his back, his body that was shooting into the sky quickly weakened. Huh! With a soft shout, a golden chain shot out from his sleeve. Then Yun Nuashing threw it toward the top of Night God Peak. Clang! A soft sound of impact was heard. The golden chain embedded itself into the mountain wall. Yun Nuashing smiled happily. While his body was still moving slightly upwards, he pulled with his palm and used this force to pull his body up into the sky. The dozen or so chains hanging behind him clanged against each other, producing clanking sounds. Little girl, hug me. He took the time to say this to the person in his arms. Then 2 soft, jade-like arms wrapped around his back, causing his heart to skip a beat. He hurriedly composed himself and freed his other hand. Suddenly, he shot out another chain and threw it towards Night God Peak. His hands pulled the 200-meter-long chains and danced under the night sky. The sound of the wind caused his long hair to dance wildly behind him. The cold sensation was transmitted to his palms through the chains, causing his hands and feet to gradually turn cold. Fortunately, there was someone in his arms, so his entire body did not turn cold. An angry roar pierced through the clouds. Yun Nuashing suddenly pulled on the chain, and the air around his body became solid. The cold air that licked his body made him shiver uncontrollably. He waved his hands up and down, and every time he did so, his speed of ascension would suddenly increase, and he would leap a few hundred meters in one leap. After an unknown amount of time, his dancing hands stiffened and his ascent came to an abrupt halt. The chains embedded in Night God Peak also fell down due to gravity. Carrying Yun Nuashing, they crashed towards the Har Mountain wall. Bang! Yun Nuashing gritted his teeth and hurriedly turned his body around. His back crashed into the mountain wall with a dull thud, causing some blood to flow from the corner of his mouth. Ziyin was not injured. I finally know how difficult it is to ascend to the 9th heaven. Yun Nuashing took a few breaths with difficulty. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth with his shoulder and could not help but smile bitterly. You haven't reached the 9th heaven yet. Your current position is at most the 6th heaven. Every heaven is like ascending to the heavens. It will be very difficult for you to ascend the rest of the journey. Of course, we're almost at the top of Night God Peak. It was rare that Zai did not speak out with a smile. A hint of worry flashed across her charming face. Sitting opposite her, Yun Nuashing curled up. The coldness caused his lips to turn black and his face to turn snow white. There are still 3 more heavens. It can't be calculated like this. Yun Nuashing smiled bitterly as he trembled. It's just a meaning. It doesn't mean that you'll reach the 9th heaven. After taking a sip of tea, Zai walked over and gently hugged Yun Nuashing in her arms. Feeling his coldness, even she was shocked. She could not help but say, "You're almost at your limit. Why don't you give up? The top of Night God Peak is truly at the top of the sky. You can reach out and touch the starry sky. It's very difficult to ascend." Cough. You didn't try to persuade me in the beginning. Now that I've reached this point, you want me to give up? It seems a little difficult. Yun Nuashing forced a smile and shook his head. How could he give up now that he had reached this point? After panting with difficulty for a while, Yin hugged Xian's slender waist with his left hand and murmured, "Lass, although it's a little difficult, you should climb behind me for now. You have to climb with your hands now." Hearing this, Xian raised her head worriedly and opened her mouth. She also wanted to persuade him to give up, but both she and Zai knew that it was harder to persuade this guy to give up than to ascend the ninth heaven. Thus, she nodded and held on to Yin Nuashing with her jade-like hands and began to move gently. As she moved, her soft and boneless body rubbed against Yin Nuashing's body, making him feel as if he was floating in the clouds. It was extremely uncomfortable, and his body could not help but tremble. "Xing Xing, why don't we give up?" Xian, who had just steadied herself on his back, could not help but speak up when she saw how badly he was trembling. She thought that Yin Nuashing was about to reach his limit. "Lass, stop shaking. If you keep rubbing against me, my beast blood will boil." Unexpectedly, Yin Nuashing only laughed bitterly and shook his head. This caused Xian's beautiful face to instantly turn blood red. Even her ears were completely red. She was extremely beautiful. She took a deep breath and suddenly moved her small mouth close to Yin Nuashing's ear. She smiled charmingly and said, "You can boil when we get back." Hearing this voice that could make anyone's bones go numb, Yin Nuashing could not help but tremble violently a few times. His entire body felt weak, and he could not help but turn around and roll his eyes at the delicate girl. She was fine. She had been protected by his aura and did not feel the coldness at all. However, he was the one suffering. His body and mind were both suffering. If there's a chance in the future, Yin Nuashing shook his head. His murmur stunned Xian. "You asked me in the past what kind of girl I liked." He grabbed onto the stone wall and pulled his body up to a new height. He stepped on a hard and cold stone and used all his strength to push himself up. Xian could not help but lower his head. Mei Mao's eyes flickered slightly. Her heart was beating very fast. He turned around and looked at Yuan Shi and the others who were dangling below. Their bodies were also swaying along with Yin Nuashing's climb. They would occasionally bump into the mountain wall, so he did not dare to make too much noise. "The girl I like. Ning Jing, I'm a madman. While I'm active, I can make the heavens and earth tremble. But I also want one." He took a few quick breaths. The pressure at high altitude made his chest feel stuffy. The lack of oxygen made his brain almost faint. He did not even know what he was muttering. "I also want a peaceful embrace to be able to suppress my madness." Yin Nuashing used all his strength to climb onto a protruding tree branch. He murmured painfully, "To suppress my madness, just like a sword needs a scabbard." "Who am I? Where did I come from? What do I need to do?" Yin Nuashing gasped for air. He squeezed out the exhaust in his lungs and forced himself to take in a mouthful of turbid air. His eyes were blurred. He looked at the mountain peak that seemed to be within reach. He tirelessly reached out his hand. In the spiritual world, Zai was also looking at the mountain peak with incomparable nervousness. The person in his arms was gradually becoming cold. She was so nervous that she could only murmur, "Seventh layer? Eighth layer? Maybe all of this isn't important." His climbing arm suddenly dropped, and his body shook violently a few times. Only one hand was left holding the stone, and this was also the hand that held the lives of more than 10 people. Xian was shocked. He hurriedly reached out to grab the mountain wall. One of his hands was also anxiously holding onto Yin Nuashing. However, before she could touch him, his other hand climbed up again. She was stunned. Tears flowed uncontrollably. "I don't know. My heart seems to have been frozen tens of millions of years, tens of eras, hundreds of years ago. What am I looking for? Nothing seems to be important." Ninth layer. Zai hugged the person in her arms tightly. His body was like ice. It made her want to cry. In the face of the suppression of the ancient god's divine right, she was completely helpless. As she listened to his nonsense, her heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. It made her suffocate. His arms unconsciously moved up and down slowly. Although his movements were slow, they were very steady and incomparably firm. In fact, they were even more steady than before. If one could see in Nuashing's face, they would realize that he had already fainted. What supported his hands was will. Chapter 442. Endless starlight descended from the star field, turning into specks of sparks that landed on a mountain peak. The specks of fireflies shone on the lake, illuminating the boundless starry sky. The starlight was extremely beautiful. The dense energy settled on the purple lake. The lake's surface was suffused with specks of starlight, and the waves were still. If one looked out from the center of the lake, they would see a mountain wall 1,000 feet away. It was slanted upwards, all the way to the edge of a cliff. The center of the lake formed a small basin. On the other side of the cliff, a pale, bloodless hand that was even covered in specks of frost slowly reached out. It landed stiffly on the top of the cliff with a loud paw. Then, a black figure that was twice the size of an ordinary person gradually rose up. A faint rustling sound could be heard. The figure climbed up, landed on the slope, and suddenly flipped over, splitting into two. It turned out that there were two figures. One of them was still lying on the ground, pressing his hands and feet hard against the ground. The other seemed to understand and hurriedly moved the dozen or so metal chains behind him up the cliff. Following that, a dozen or so black figures appeared to have fainted. Stars. There was a hint of panic in the pleasant voice. Looking at the dozen or so people lying on the ground, and then seeing the first figure covered in frost, her heart throbbed with fear. Zia nodded. He hurriedly carried Yin Nuashing and dashed towards the night god spring that was 1,000 feet away. The coldness of his body made her feel helpless. High up in the sky, all the energy seemed insignificant. Space and time seemed to have become blurry here. The starry sky was within reach. It was enough to stand on tiptoe. The distance of 1,000 feet only took a few minutes. After carefully placing the person in his arms on the edge of the purple lake, Xian carefully retreated to the side. Mei Mao stared at him without blinking. Her jade-like hands were clenched together due to nervousness. After a short moment, Yin Nuashing's body suddenly emitted a warm current, and the frost on his body melted at an impressive speed. Strands of hot air also emitted from his body. Seeing this scene, Xian instead heaved a sigh of relief. Then he saw that the lake water around him had actually formed a small whirlpool, and it seemed as if the lake water had drilled into his body. Xian was even more relieved. After waiting for a few minutes, and seeing that there was no problem, Xian turned around and ran back in the direction he came from. He looked back from time to time, as if he was still worried. After a while, Xian returned. Her jade-like hands were dragging a few broken chains. Even her willowy waist had a few chains wrapped around it. Her hands and feet were tied by herself, and her entire body was wrapped in chains. Her beautiful face was drenched in sweat, and her pearly white teeth were biting her red lips. Every step she took left a small footprint on the ground. It was easy to imagine how much weight she was bearing. After dragging everyone into the night god spring, Xian lay weakly on the edge of the lake, leaning against Yin Nuashing. Her voluptuous breasts rose and fell rapidly, and her small mouth was still gasping for breath. There were dark red marks on her ankles and jade-like hands. It was unknown how such a petite body could contain so much strength. Xing Xing, she flipped over and landed in the lake. It was not as cold as she had imagined, but a warm current. The lake water turned into a warm current and entered her body, making her feel slightly better. Leaning against Yin Nuashing's chest, Mei Mao looked at his unconscious appearance and felt a pang of pain. Only she had just experienced what it felt like to be tied up by a dozen people. Only she knew how much pain he had just endured, and it was at such a high level. Suddenly, a muffled groan rang out from the throat, causing Xian to open her beautiful eyes in exhaustion. Within those eyes that contained all the beauty in the world, some astonishment flashed past. Cough, cough. Where is this? That muffled groan seemed to have set off a chain reaction. Then, lying in the shallow water, with only half of their bodies above the water, Yuan Shi and the others slowly opened their eyes. One by one, they held their heads and woke up. Then, They looked at each other in astonishment. Where? Where is this? We were at the altar of the gods just now. Looking up, Yuan-Shi stared blankly at the starry sky that seemed to be within reach. He looked at the people around him blankly. I don't know. Hearing his words, Yao Hua was also stunned for a long time. He seemed to be a little confused. Nightmare, who had been dragged up with him, had the biggest reaction when he woke up. He immediately jumped up, splashing water everywhere. A pair of black eyes opened clearly. Seeing more than 10 pairs of astonished eyes focused on him, he could not help but be startled. He then heard the splashing sound and saw the broken chains around his waist. Finally, he saw the purple liquid below his waist. His eyes suddenly filled with excitement. Night God Spring. We've arrived at the Night God Spring. Hearing this, Unz and the others were stunned. They hurriedly lowered their heads and saw the purple lake. Then they felt the boundless energy surging like lightning. They immediately knew that he was not lying. Night shook. Just as Yao Hua was about to laugh out loud, Mu Ling and Jining shushed him at the same time. Their slender, jade-like fingers were placed beside their mouths, causing them to involuntarily swallow their voices. Then, they looked in the direction of her 2 fingers and were slightly stunned. Soon after, they understood and smiled. They all looked at each other, stood up, and walked a little further away. In the direction that the 2 girls were pointing at, Yin Nuoxing and Zian were tightly huddled together. Their breathing was weak, but even. They did not know when they had fallen asleep. Yuan-Shi and the others thought for a moment and realized what had happened. They had arrived at the Night God Spring, but the 2 of them were unconscious. It seemed that there was a connection between the 2. I don't know what the 2 of them did, but they actually fell asleep. Mu Ling covered her mouth and laughed softly. Her small feet walked in the lake, making a very soft sound. Look at the 2 of them being so peaceful. As expected, little star like Xian. Yuan-Shi could not help but laugh. Who knows? Everyone laughed softly. Since the 2 of them were exhausted, they should leave the peace here to them. The energy in the depths was abnormally dense. They should go and cultivate first. Otherwise, it would be a waste of the efforts of the 2 of them. 1,000 years have passed, and your rise is only for your fall. Everything will disappear, but it doesn't matter. Nothing is important. Come, let's end this. Everything will be liberated as you wish. Spread, slaughter, everything. I am a demon, the demon emperor, the only god in this world. Destroy everything before your eyes, and all of this will be meaningless. Life and death, creation and destruction, condemnation. Countless images flashed through Yun Nuoxing's mind. They were all strange pictures with no pattern to speak of. However, they gave Yun Nuoxing a very strange feeling. These pictures, together, composed a melody that slowly led her to a reality, or rather, an end. Demon. It was not the demon realm. It was the true meaning of the demon race. Great demon, demon god, god demon. This was a very strange feeling. There was no basis for it, no origin, but this was the feeling he had. Memory fragments? Looking at the flashing images in front of him, Yin Nuoxing turned his head. After a long time, he shook his head. No, they are not memory fragments. These did not seem like memories. They were more like a command, a demonic voice. Under those words, billowing demonic energy made him frown. It was as if he saw a scene in the future. You're too close to becoming a devil. This won't be a good thing for your future path as a devil. The nether void sword slowly appeared beside him, causing him to turn his head and glance at it before withdrawing his gaze. Not a good thing? Yin Nuoxing frowned. The 6 wings of the demon race, primal chaos, that book of yours, and even my netherworld ruin sword and the evil spirit eye that you cultivate, all of them contain a lot of demonic energy. Netherworld ruin paused, then said in a deep voice, the human body cannot accept the power of so many demons. It will be difficult for you to endure any one of them, even if you have the spiritual divine body. Frowning, Yin Nuoxing was just about to say something when he saw a tremor in his eyes. After that, a large ball of pitch black mist suddenly appeared in front of him. That familiar dark energy rushed towards him, causing him to stop breathing for a moment. He hurriedly took a few steps back. Wasn't this primal chaos sealed in the shadow? Why? Brother Nuashing. A soft voice that he hadn't heard for a long time sounded. Yin Nuashing felt a little comfortable when he heard it. He turned around and saw a beautiful figure in aqua blue throw herself into his arms. It warmed his heart. He gently stroked the head of the person in his arms and smiled. Exiner, I haven't seen you for a long time. Why are you hiding in my soul and not coming out? Hearing this, Lan Exiner raised her head and smiled happily. Yin Nuashing saw some fatigue in those clear aqua blue Maymao. He couldn't help but be stunned. Brother Nuashing, Exiner has been suppressing primal chaos in your soul. Little Phoenix, and I couldn't get away. Seeing his stunned expression, Lan Exer shook her head and continued to smile. That day, we did seal Hun Dun in a Brother Nuashing shadow. But that time in the ghastly forest, the seal was broken. Hun Dun, who was born with Brother Nuashing, took over your body. From then on, the gap in the seal was difficult to fill. Primal chaos would occasionally wander into your soul. However, the scale was not large. Fortunately, it did not do anything. Little Yishi was also not affected. The scale was not large. Yin Nuashing looked suspiciously at the huge cloud of black mist. How could it be so big that it occupied his entire vision? It was even bigger than the first time he saw it. This is where the problem lies. Suddenly, spots of light gathered around him. Then, Yin Nuashing saw a slender, light purple figure slowly taking shape. She seemed to be the one who said that. What's the problem? Seeing that Z had also appeared, Yin Nuashing asked in confusion. Mei Mao raised her head slightly and glanced at him. Then, under his slightly stiff and embarrassed gazes, she hugged his head and stroked it gently. She even whispered, "Little idiot, you scared me to death." Hearing this, Yin Nuashing's cheeks turned red. She didn't expect Ziyi to be worried about her. Cough, stop fooling around. Z, the problem you mentioned just now, what's the problem? Yin Nuashing asked as she pushed Ziyi away gently with her hair. The power of the primal chaos has increased. Ziyi sighed and said solemnly, Night God Spring, Night God Spring. When you first said that you sensed the smell of darkness, I should have advised you not to come. I didn't expect something like this to happen. Yin Nuashing opened her mouth, but before she could say anything, Ziyi continued. The night god spring is said to be an energy liquid formed under the influence of darkness. But in reality, it is said to be formed from the blood of a god. To be able to form the power of one's bloodline into such a huge lake is indeed something that only a god can do. And the mistake is that this night god spring is strange. Or rather, I never expected that the latter legend was actually true. Ziyi sighed and looked at Yin Nuashing's stunned and confused expression. He shook his head and said, the primal chaos can only be fully awakened when it encounters demonic energy. The mutation of the primal chaos happened the moment you entered the night god spring. Hearing this, Yin Nuashing's face turned pale. She had also guessed something. This night god is a demon god, a god of the demon race. Chapter 443. Chaos was said to be one of the four beasts that have been passed down since the primordial age. It did not have a physical body, and no one had ever seen what it looked like. The only thing that was known was that it was the incarnation of the demon race. The legendary night god spring was the blood that flowed out of the demon god's body. The essence of the night god spring, which contained divine power, would not disappear with the passage of time. Even now, it was still like fresh blood. The power of the demon god gushed into Yin Nuashing's body like a spring, nourishing her withered body. At the same time, the power of the demon god also gushed into her soul and finally came into contact with chaos. The night god is a demon god. This power of darkness, that chaos. Yin Nuashing suddenly took a deep breath when she thought of the serious consequences. Such a huge amount of demon god's power would be enough to feed chaos and allow it to leap out of its infancy. At that time, you don't have to worry about that. Hun Dun can't grow just because he wants to. Didn't I say that when Hun Dun first appeared, his soul was destroyed, and he was locked in a cage to endure endless refinement? Although I don't know how he managed to escape, he definitely won't be able to devour you in a short period of time. Moreover, Zi gently patted Yin Nuoxing's head and said with a smile, "You should trust us a little. After all, we're still in your soul. Even if Hun Dun wants to cause trouble, he'll have to get through us first." Seeing Zi acting like an elder sister, Yin Nuoxing could not help but chuckle. How could he not trust them? He had allowed them to live in his soul. There is probably nothing else in the world that could show his trust in them more than this. Of course, if I don't trust you, who else can I trust? Hearing this, Lon Sheener could not help but giggle. The Netherworld Ruins sword also seemed to sigh helplessly. Then, all of them laughed at the same time. After a moment, Violet Knight shook her head and said seriously, "Although the chaos is not a threat for the time being, but looking at the condition of your body, little star, there is still a certain degree of danger in your path as a demonic tier. We need you to make a choice. No, you need to be mentally prepared." Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing also sorted out her emotions. She took a deep breath, nodded, and said with a solemn expression, "Go ahead." Seeing Yin Nuoxing's reaction, Zi turned his head to look at Lon Xian and the Netherworld Ruin Sword. He nodded and said softly, "The demonic rank is the same as the other ranks. You need to compress and condense the immortal qi in your body. Finally, you need to transform it into demonic qi. That is the demonic rank. However, the energy in your body, the power of the stars, will not be transformed into demonic qi. This is because it is one of the purest forms of energy other than God power. It is even purer than God power. Therefore, when you advance to the demonic rank, you will only need to expand the volume of energy in your body. Then, you will compress the energy and change its quality. You should understand this. What we're going to talk about is the path of the demonic rank." Zia's voice deepened when he said the last two words. Seeing the seriousness on her pretty face, Yin Nuoxing also held his breath. Then, he heard her say, "The demon stage is different from the mortal stage and the immortal stage. If you continue to cultivate, it'll be divided into two types." Zi paused. She slowly raised a finger and said slowly, "The first type is the most common. It is also the most common path on the path of cultivation. It is also the path that most people take, becoming a demon. This path will only change the energy in your body. It will not have any other effects on your body. Yuan Qian walked the path of becoming a demon. It should be said that unless there are special circumstances, very few people will choose the other path." Zi sighed. "The other path?" Yin Nuoxing asked in confusion. "Mn." Violet Knight stared at him and said, "Unfortunately, your body's special condition can very easily lead you to another path, to fall to the dark side. As for the other path, it is also a very special cultivation path in the demon race. However, there are records in history that there are humans who have also cultivated using the abyssal cultivation method. They have dyed their souls and spirits with demon qi, completely turning themselves into a demon. A demon." Zi said softly. "Suming also said that you have come into contact with too much demonic energy. If you come into contact with it too early, it will imperceptibly change your body. This is not good news for you, that." Yin Nuoxing raised his hand weakly, causing Ziyi and the others to look away. Then he smiled bitterly and said, "What is the difference between these two paths? Or rather, is there any danger in becoming a demon? Of the two, naturally, falling to the dark side is the most difficult. No, it's not the most difficult. Falling to the dark side requires a lot of effort, not just in terms of cultivation. Moreover, as I said, falling to the dark side is the cultivation method of the demon clan. Have you thought about the consequences of cultivating the demon clan with a human body?" Violet Knight said. Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing shook his head. He had not cultivated to the demonic race, nor had he seen a person who had become a demon. Naturally, he did not know the consequences of becoming a demon in the human race. Z could not help but sigh when he saw the confusion on Qin Lai's face. He exchanged a glance with Lan Xiner and Su Ming before he nodded and said in a deep voice, "Just like that day in the ghastly forest when primal chaos took over your body will often be out of your control. In a worst-case scenario, your consciousness will be devoured by the demonic qi, and you will completely become a demon that only knows how to kill, never to rise again. Becoming a demon with a thought, using your body to control the demon, turning the demon's power into your weapon. Falling into a demon with a thought, using the demon to control your body. Pursuing the ultimate power, you will not hesitate to turn yourself into a demon." A few words surged in Yun Nuoxing's mind, causing his heart to palpitate. That time in the Ghost Chi Forest, even though he was unconscious and his consciousness was suppressed by the primal chaos, he could still vaguely know a little of what happened. Although it was not much, it left a deep impression on him. At that time, in the eyes of others, he was like a demon king who ruled the world. Will that be my future? Thinking of himself holding the Su Ming sword and the Ling Hong sword, full of demonic qi, Yun Nuoxing could not help but shudder. Forget it. Divine weapons are dangerous. It's better for me to control them. Su Ming has his own consciousness, but it's hard to say about the Ling Hong sword and the others. Seeing his expression flickering, as if he had thought of something terrifying, Ziye's eyebrows twitched. Smiling like a flower, she rubbed his face and said, "I just want you to be mentally prepared. I didn't say that you will definitely fall into a demon in the future. The process is still controllable. The demonic qi that contaminates the body can be neutralized with divine power. Saint Spell arrays, light element, and so on." Su Ming also circled Yun Nuoxing twice and said, "Phew." Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing let out a big sigh of relief and said in a relaxed manner, "Then I'll just do it myself. Don't scare me." He knew Saint Spell arrays. Yishi had taught him before. Although it was only one piece, the most powerful element in his body was the light element. With your weak Saint Spell arrays and the light element, will you be able to purify the demonic qi, or will you be suppressed? I'm not sure about this. Guessing that he would say this, Zi spread out her hands. Her delicate oval face was full of sympathy as she closed her main mouth and said, Yin Nuoxing froze. And because of the opposing energy, if the two come into contact, there will be an uncontrollable reaction. At that time, the divine power might be devoured by the demonic qi. Lan Xer also quietly added. Yin Nuoxing almost spat out blood. This, his eyebrows twitching for a while, Yin Nuoxing said helplessly, "Then what should I do?" Saint Spell arrays. I don't know any array masters. As for the light element, speaking of which, don't I have Xianyin's god imprint in my body? Why would I be contaminated by demonic qi? Suddenly thinking of something, Yin Nuoxing asked in confusion. He remembered that the god imprint would prevent all demonic things from getting close to the body. That's the energy born in your body. Can the imprint in your body kick the owner out? Zi rolled her eyes. All right. Yin Nuoxing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She muttered, "If it's the light element, then we have to find the light god king." But after a long time, Yin Nuoxing was still bashful. Her gaze was a little unnatural and erratic. The two people and the sword looked at each other. Zi couldn't help but ask, "But what?" Yin Nuoxing looked at her carefully. She rubbed her palms together. After a while, she laughed dryly and said, "I'm sorry, silence." Ziyi, and the netherworld sword seemed to be petrified. Yin Nuoxing clearly saw a cross-shaped vein appear on the former's face. He couldn't help but take a step back. Brother Nuoxing, this concerns the rest of your life. Whether you want to be a mad demon or a human in the future, no matter how embarrassed you are, you have to say it. It's just a matter of talking about it. I see that the 9 Gods Temple cares about you so much. They won't refuse to help you. Lan Xin shook his arm. Although her adorable face was full of smiles, Yin Nuoxing caught a rare glimpse of a familiar, murderous aura. Killing intent. Yin Nuoxing shuddered violently. If you don't want to turn into a crazy demon that we can't suppress in the future, slaughtering the divine realm and being taken care of by some god that pops out of nowhere, then obediently go find the light god king and wash away the demonic energy in your body. Z sighed heavily. After thinking for a while, he said, or you can go find an array master and see if there's any saint array master that can wash away the demonic energy. All right. Yin Nuashing nodded weakly. Netherworld Sword looked at his reluctant appearance, then looked around the sea of fire. Finally, he stopped at a place. After a while, he smiled and said, "There's no need to go through so much trouble. You have a way. I remember that the energy in the Netherworld Sword is more demonic, right? At least for now." As soon as Netherworld Sword finished speaking, Zia's clear and melodious voice immediately sounded. There was some doubt in her voice. "Of course, I don't have a way, but there is one person here who has a way." Netherworld Sword smiled mysteriously. Hearing this, Yin Nuashing's gaze naturally fixed on Lan Xr. Among those present, he was most familiar with Ziyi and Netherworld Sword, but they didn't have the so-called divine power. In the end, only Lan Xr was left. When Lan Xr saw him looking at her, she quickly waved her hand. She did not have any divine power. The void skill that she was practicing was about the use of the power of space. It had nothing to do with this. Ahem. Netherworld Sword coughed dryly, then tapped Yin Nuashing with the scabbard. He pointed the tip of his sword at a certain place and said reproachfully, "Have you forgotten someone who still exists in your soul?" Hearing this, Yin Nuashing looked in the direction she was pointing. He instantly understood everything. There was a huge silver mark floating in the direction Netherworld Sword was pointing at. It was the divine mark that Xian Yin had left in his soul. However, what made him happy was the huge cocoon of light behind the mark. It was the cocoon of light formed by Yishi's soul. Of course I haven't forgotten. It's just that little she is still in a deep sleep. How could I possibly think in that direction? Yin Nuashing smiled bitterly. How could he forget? So you've forgotten where you are right now. Netherworld Sword sighed helplessly and said, "The night god spring is formed by the blood of a divine spirit of the demon clan. Z is right. It might be able to solve your barrier, but the night god spring also has the effect of tempering the soul and helping it recover." Hearing this, a look of wild joy flashed across Yin Nuashing's face. Before he could say anything, Netherworld Sword smiled and said what he wanted to say. In other words, if we're lucky this time, Yishi might be able to recover her soul and awaken from her deep sleep. Chapter 444. I've seen your memories, and I've seen how Yishi used the formation. Although she doesn't remember it herself, according to my estimation, she should be a 7th or even 8th grade divine level master. Although I don't know how many saint spell formations she has learned, at her level, she should have a lot of them. She should have a purifying saint spell formation, which should be enough to suppress your demon chi, said Su Ming. She's been sleeping for so long. It's time for her to wake up and move around. Yin Nuashing nodded. He already knew that Yishi's grade wasn't low, so he wasn't too surprised. Then he quickly raised his head and asked, "But how do I wake her up?" The soul was a mysterious thing, and he hadn't studied it yet. He didn't know how to repair the damage to the soul. Yin Nuashing's soul had been damaged because of the divine body, Su Ming's sword, Ling Hong's sword, and God's mark, so he didn't have to worry about any hidden dangers. I don't know what alchemists are good at. I'm just a small formation master. Yin Nuashing spread his hands helplessly. Although alchemists and formation masters both used the power of the soul, the latter leaned more towards mental strength. The power of the soul could only be used for coordination and detection in the formation. Unless it was some special formation that had to do with the power of the soul, ordinary formation masters wouldn't pay much attention to the cultivation of the soul. Only alchemists relied on the power of the soul. You don't have to worry about that. The energy of the night god spring is automatically activated. You don't need to control it. Find a way to guide its energy into your soul, and then transfer it to the light cocoon that Yishi is turned into, said Su Ming indifferently. Ziyi waved his hand when he heard that. He said, just expose your soul. There's some energy from the night god spraying in your soul right now, but the energy you've unintentionally attracted isn't much. It's not enough for Yi Shi to repair her soul. But right now, you should first repair this broken body of yours. Speaking up to this point, Zi rolled her eyes at him in a rebuking manner. Her delicate and charming appearance was extremely charming. With the body of a fifth immortal, you were able to climb up to the ninth heaven without being able to use any energy. Furthermore, you even brought along more than 10 people. I'm afraid this action of yours will be recorded in the history of the God Realm. Yun Nuashing awkwardly looked to the side. There was definitely something else she was going to say. However, such a messy method will cause your body to be in tatters. You should take advantage of the time before anyone comes up to treat your injuries. Sure enough, after Yun Nuashing hesitated for a moment, Zi began to reprimand him in displeasure. Nodding bitterly, Yun Nuashing hurriedly jumped up when he saw Zi Yi waving her hand to send him off. He hurriedly said, I forgot to ask, what? Zi Yi and the others all turned to look at him, making him feel very awkward. Scratching his head, Yun Nuashing said, why is this place called the Ninth Heaven? I remember that back at the Gathering Fate Pavilion, Shueching and the others also call the 9 steps the Ninth Heaven. Zi Yi wrinkled her nose when she heard that. After thinking for a while, she said, because this is the highest place in the God Realm. It's located under the starry sky. You can touch the starry sky by standing on your tiptoes. The Gathering Fate Pavilion you mentioned, well, it's more or less the same. If there's nothing else, then leave. It won't be too late to talk after you've finished healing. With that, Zi waved her hand and was about to send Yun Nuashing out. Yun Nuashing smiled bitterly when he saw the fluorescent light rising from his body. This girl really didn't give him any face today. She chased him away just like that. This was his spiritual domain, after all. Zi sighed when she saw Yun Nuashing being swallowed by the fluorescent light and disappearing from this spiritual domain. Then, her gaze gradually became serious. Even Lan Shiner looked a little unhappy. You all hid the situation from him just now, right after a long time. Su Ming finally spoke slowly. Zi Yi and Lan Shiner were stunned when they heard her suddenly say that. They looked at each other and then nodded helplessly. That's right, they had hidden something very important. Of course, they definitely wouldn't harm Yun Nuashing. However, they wanted to hide it from Yun Nuashing for a while before they had to face the situation. The Su Ming sword buzzed softly, and an energy barrier silently formed, enveloping the three of them. They wouldn't let Yun Nuashing know what they were talking about. Su Ming, according to your deduction, what do you think the probability of Little Dumbstar falling to the dark side is? Zi sighed when she saw what she was doing and asked slowly. Sigh. Hearing this, the Su Ming sword couldn't help but sigh. After hesitating for a moment, it murmured, close to 80%. Moreover, even if Yishi awakens or the Light God King takes action, they might not be able to suppress the demonic aura on her body. You've also deduced it? Zi shook her head helplessly. She thought that she was the only one who knew the answer. Lan Shiner nodded. The three of them had been in his soul all this time, so they knew what was happening inside better than he did. They just didn't say it out loud. Brother Nuashing's demonic aura is the after effect of using those strange methods to increase his strength. It's an energy born from his own body. He carries the element of light with him, and the demonic aura is mixed with the element of light. I'm afraid it won't be that easy to break through. The demonic aura is nothing. Little Star's divine body can withstand the pressure of the demonic aura. However, the soul, it's difficult for an immortal grade cultivator to cultivate a demonic soul and contain the power of the elements. Even with the divine body, it's difficult for an immortal grade cultivator to cultivate a demonic soul. Although the power of his soul has far surpassed that of an ordinary demonic grade cultivator, it's still an immortal grade cultivator's soul. If he steps into the demonic grade with an immortal grade soul, then falling to the dark side is almost inevitable. Zi said solemnly. For a moment, the two people and the sword fell silent. A thick sadness shrouded the place like a dark cloud. It couldn't be dispelled or brushed away. Forget it. Let's wait until Yi Shi wakes up. If she can't do anything by then, we'll go to the Light Supreme Being. If the Light Supreme Being can't do anything by then, Lon Sheener asked nervously. By then, we can only resign ourselves to fate, whether he falls to the dark side, or all of this will depend on Little Star's own will, Ziyin said solemnly. Ziyin said seriously. After a while, he suddenly laughed softly. Don't worry, that little bastard's life is very good. He's a person with great luck. Didn't the 9 Gods Hall say that he's the child of God? They definitely won't let anything happen to him. Moreover, there's also his little sister Xianin. Hearing this, the 3 women couldn't help but chuckle. However, their laughter was filled with helplessness. They could only talk about this matter when the time came. The arm soaked in the night god's spring trembled slightly. The man leaning against the shore trembled and opened his eyes. His eyes reflected the stars. The twinkling starlight made his light purple eyes look exceptionally beautiful. He could even hear faint laughter coming from not far away. His slightly dim eyes were slowly stained with color under the starlight. Yin Nuoxing blinked and looked at the starry sky that seemed to be close at hand. He couldn't help but feel a little intoxicated. This was the first time he was so close to a star domain. He could touch the star domain that he yearned for just by reaching out. So beautiful, he couldn't help but murmur, causing everyone not far away to hurriedly keep quiet. They turned their gazes in unison and saw that Yin Nuoxing was staring at the sea of stars without blinking. They all heaved a sigh of relief. Ziyin, who had recovered long ago, saw that Yin Nuoxing had woken up. She hurriedly walked to his side. The shocking cuts on the former's body had completely disappeared. His jade-white skin looked soft and supple. Little Star, are you all right? Ziyin asked nervously as she gently touched his pulse. When she asked, Yuan Shi, Jining, and the others also came over. 10 pairs of eyes stared at Yin Nuoxing in a daze. This made him feel a little embarrassed, and his handsome face was a little hot. I'm fine. I just feel a little tired. Yin Nuoxing shook his head and chuckled. He quickly glanced at everyone and coughed dryly in a panic. I don't have anything to look at. Don't look at me. It's so hard. Go and cultivate. Be good. Hearing this, everyone laughed dryly. They still remembered that Yin Nuoxing couldn't stand being stared at by so many people. Therefore, other than Ziyin and Yuan Shi, Jining and the others all retreated to the side. However, when they heard the last word, everyone looked a little confused. Brother, it's really been hard on you. Yuan Shi patted Yin Nuoxing's shoulder and sighed. This sigh made the latter a little confused. He glanced at Ziyin, who wanted to say something but stopped. He seemed to understand something. This girl must have already told him about how he led everyone up the night god peak. Then he chuckled and said, It's not a big deal. It's rare for you to come up here. Take advantage of the fact that there's no one else here, and cultivate well. Yin Nuoxing patted Yuan Shi's shoulder and chuckled. Yuan Shi glanced at the emotions in his eyes. He nodded and didn't say anything. He slowly walked toward the depths of the purple lake and muttered in his heart, Something must have happened to Nuoxing. Yin Nuoxing smiled and waved his hand. He watched as Yuan Shi began to cultivate in the water that reached her waist. Only then did Yin Nuoxing retract his smile. His brows slowly furrowed as he pondered how to safely guide the energy of the night god spring into his soul. The energy of the night god spring is too great. Even if it's not guided by itself, it's 10 times faster than usual. He secretly sighed in his heart. If he suddenly guided this energy into his soul, he was afraid that his weak soul would explode. Just as he was feeling conflicted about the night god spring, he suddenly felt a gaze firmly fixed on him. This caused him to raise his head somewhat awkwardly. As expected, he saw Ziyin sitting by his side, staring at him with her bright eyes. Seeing this girl's bright eyes, Yin Nuoxing shook his head helplessly and said, Girl, aren't you going to cultivate? Hearing this, Ziyin shook her head gently. Mei Mao glanced at the group, cultivating quietly in the distance. After a while, she said softly, Xing Xing, you have something on your mind. Yin Nuoxing was stunned. He opened his mouth and wanted to deny it, but his throat felt like it was stuck with a fishbone. He stared at her beautiful side profile for a long time before sighing. He scratched his head and replied, "Yes, the night god's spring has the effect of repairing souls. It's been a few years since you came to the divine continent. I want to take this opportunity to wake up that little fool." Yin Nuashing sighed. "Little fool?" Xian turned her gaze and tilted her head. Her dark purple hair swayed gently in the water. Her Maimao also sparkled with the color of starlight. Yin Nuashing nodded. A trace of tenderness and doting flashed across his eyes. When that guy was mentioned, his heart would always feel warm. Yes, a certain little fool who didn't hesitate to use the forbidden power of a divine weapon for us. Chapter 445. Yuyin City, the Abyss Temple, the Forbidden Formation, the Choice of Dawn, the Cenotaph, the Song of Death, the Purple Sea of Flames, and the Cocoon Formation. Those scenes and words that had long disappeared from his mind were now being recounted by Yun Nuashing, and the scenes from that time would appear in his mind. At the beginning, Yishi had sealed off the entire city, so he had no choice but to be her enemy. Later on, he couldn't bear to let them go. From strangers to acquaintances, he was pressed into her evolving world, the Cultivation Formation. He couldn't help but laugh every time he thought about it. No discord, no concord. That's not right. At that time, I was only a small mortal realm cultivator, while little she was a high and mighty underworld emperor. If I hadn't broken her forbidden formation, I'm afraid she would never have taken me seriously. Yin Nuashing recounted the story between him and Yi Shi in one breath. Xian also listened with great interest, his eyes flashing with extraordinary splendor. After that, when we came to the Divine Prefecture from the Sourcepeak domain, we were unfortunately locked in the spatial passageway. Although I cut open the spatial passageway, we fell into the void. At that time, little she forcefully used my Linghong sword to open a gap in space, and we escaped. Yun Nuashing took a deep breath as he recalled the scene when they first arrived in the western regions of the Divine Prefecture. If he had chosen to use another transmission gate at that time, this wouldn't have happened, and little she wouldn't have fallen into a deep sleep for so long. But if it hadn't been for the space passage, Yin Nuashing might not have met Xian, and this trip to the Divine Prefecture would have been aimless. It might have been a blessing in disguise. That Miss Yishi, where is she now? Xian asked curiously. Yin Nuashing pointed between his eyebrows and said indifferently, "Little she's soul suffered a backlash from the Linghong sword, and now she's sleeping in my soul. She happened to hear Zai say that the night god spring has the effect of healing souls, so she came to the forest of eternal night to try her luck, although this is only one of her goals." One of her goals? Xian blinked at Mei Mao. Could it be that little star came to the forest of eternal night for another purpose? Rubbing his head, Yin Nuashing nodded, put his mouth next to her little ear, and said softly, "Ranked 72nd on the Divine Flame list. Eternal Night Flame." Purple Night said, "Maybe it's still here." Hearing this, Xian suddenly came to a realization. No wonder he asked Huiji to sense if there was anything unusual at that time. He even said that he was looking for something. It turned out that the Yun Nuo star came for the Divine Flame. I still don't know where the Eternal Night Flame is. Although I've tried to use the fire element and soul power to sense it, it's not very effective. When I came here, I found a few energy sources and tried to change my path, but I felt that the energy changed direction halfway. After a few times, I still can't figure out where it is. Yin Nuashing said softly. After thinking for a while, he added self-deprecatingly, "I'm like a headless fly running around in a foggy forest." Xian paused, feeling that something was wrong. She asked in surprise then, "Little star, you change your path frequently to find the flame of eternal night, not because you couldn't find the location of the night god mountain?" Yin Nuashing blushed a little after being exposed, but she still nodded. "But little star, you were still angry after we arrived at the night god mountain. You said that someone caught up with us." Xian frowned in confusion. "Life is like a play. It's all about acting." Yin Nuashing stuck out her tongue. Xian, so you can go and cultivate in peace. I have some work to do. Yin Nuashing smiled. Xian nodded, got up, and walked to the side. She trusted Yin Nuashing very much, but even so, she didn't go too far away. She sat down about 10 feet away, took one last look at Yin Nuashing, and then slowly closed her eyes. Yin Nuashing sighed in relief when she saw that Xian had been coaxed to cultivate. She lifted her hand from the purple lake and looked at the purple water in her palm with a strange expression. Demon God's blood. Forget it. Yin Nuashing shook his head and tossed these chaotic thoughts out of his mind. He hurriedly crossed his legs and focused his attention on the night god spring, which was continuously changing its energy. He sighed softly, and his spiritual strength slowly surged out from between his eyebrows. After pondering for a moment, the spiritual strength that had left his body condensed into a transparent medicinal cauldron that was suspended on the surface of the lake. Looking at the transparent medicine cauldron floating in front of her, Yin Nuashing couldn't help but reach out and flick it. She muttered, "Should I refine it?" Demon God's blood contains a huge amount of divinity. It can be absorbed into the body without too much refinement. Zai glanced at the cauldron that was condensed from the soul and said indifferently that divinity's power is a great tonic for a god with an incomplete soul. After saying that, he seemed to know what Xian wanted to say and added, "Divinity's power is a kind of energy that can only be obtained after becoming a god. You will know in the future." Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes and snorted softly. As if in a fit of pique, she drew out a full cauldron of lake water. She snapped her fingers, and a light purple flame appeared at the tip of her finger. With a flick of her finger, the flame quickly rushed into the cauldron and plunged into the purple lake water. "Are you making soup?" Zai rolled his eyes. Yin Nuashing's face couldn't help but twitch. She took back the cauldron and a part of the night god's spring and placed it in front of Zai. She said indignantly, "You are good. You go." Zai raised his head and saw that Zai was pouting. He almost couldn't hold back his laughter. He rolled his eyes at Zai and stood up while stretching. He carried the transparent soul cauldron and walked towards the soul light cocoon. Seeing that she was really going to move, Yin Nuashing wrinkled her nose and muttered in a voice that only she could hear, "Anyway, I am an idiot who doesn't know anything." Although her voice was very soft, it was still heard by Lon, Exeter, and the Netherworld Ruin Sword. The two of them looked at each other and laughed helplessly, shaking their heads. Zai carried the cauldron and the night god spring to Yi Shi's light cocoon. He gently placed the cauldron down and looked at the light cocoon that was several times larger than her. He waved his hand and lifted it up. Then, under Yin Nuashing's shocked gaze, he threw it into the cauldron. Before Yin Nuashing could cry out, her lily-white hands danced like lightning. As her hands moved, the surrounding sea of fire seemed to be pulled and violently churned. All of it surged towards the cauldron in front of Zai and slowly gathered at the bottom of the cauldron. In the end, it actually turned into a beautiful purple lotus flower that bloomed. Wisps of flames rose from the lotus flower. The faint purple flames suddenly increased in temperature and swallowed the cauldron and the light cocoon. Are you making soup?" Yin Nuashing was so frightened that she almost swallowed her tongue. If he was making soup, then Zai was trying to roast Yi Shi. If not for the fact that she didn't feel Zai's malice, she would have already rushed forward to stop her. "What do you know?" Zai turned around and rolled her eyes at him. The night god spring is not an ordinary item. Even with the temperature of the divine flames, it will take a very long time to refine it. It can only be refined directly through the body. Soaking Yi Shi's light cocoon in the night god spring and using the divine flames to control the speed of the energy flow is the correct way to use it. It won't suffocate Shi to death, right? Yin Nuashing muttered worriedly. Zai rolled her eyes at him and pointed at the light cocoon with her slender finger. She frowned and didn't seem to want to say anything. Seeing that Zai was looking at him as if he was an idiot, Yin Nuashing laughed embarrassedly and turned to look at the light cocoon. Only then did he see that the silver cocoon that had been quiet all this time had actually lit up a little. "All right, it's useful." Yin Nuashing was delighted to see this, but when he saw Zai staring at Mei Mao, he laughed bitterly. He raised his hand and pointed it at the light cocoon. Traces of the power of the stars flowed out of his palm and wrapped around the light cocoon. When the two collided, the power of the stars wasn't refined by the divine flames, nor did it fuse with the light cocoon. Instead, it strangely adhered to the light cocoon. For a moment, the silver light cocoon seemed to be transformed into the color of the stars. When the power of the stars moved, the energy of the night god's spring also slowly spread upwards. Under the illumination of the two black lights, one could even see specks of light twinkling like stars. The purplish-black light began to weaken at an observable rate, while the power of the stars and the divine flames became denser and denser. The twinkling starlight on the silver light cocoon became denser and denser. In the end, it almost looked like a star domain. As the divine flames danced, the star domain pulsed in and out in an endless cycle. Little Shi, you've been asleep for a few years. It's time for you to wake up. Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but say excitedly as he looked at the starry light cocoon in front of him. Yin Nuoxing didn't receive a reply. The sound of the flames exploding still reverberated in the air. The silver light cocoon continued to float, but the petite figure didn't emerge from the cocoon. Wait a little longer. Seeing that Yin Nuoxing's mouth was slightly agape, and he was a little confused, Ziyi comforted him softly. Just as he finished speaking, the light cocoon that had been quiet all this time suddenly trembled. A vast and terrifying soul energy suddenly rippled and exploded with the light cocoon at the center. The sudden appearance of the soul energy explosion caused Yin Nuoxing's expression to change drastically. If this terrifying soul energy shock wave hit him, it would probably instantly turn his soul into ashes. Even Ziyi and Lan Xian were slightly shocked. In a flash, they appeared in front of Yin Nuoxing. Three similarly vast soul energies instantly condensed into a soul barrier that shielded Yin Nuoxing behind them. His eyes stared nervously at the soul energy that was spreading towards him. He then looked at Ziyi and the other two who had calm expressions. Only then did he suppress the panic in his heart. Just as the few soul energies were about to collide head-on, the soul energy explosion suddenly trembled and then disappeared in an instant. Kacha! The raging flames suddenly exploded, and the cocoon of light turned into dust in an instant. A petite figure slowly appeared under the illumination of the flames. Her wine-red hair and 4 long strands of black hair appeared especially bright under the faint purple light of the flames. The pair of ruby eyes that had been tightly shut for a few years also quietly opened at this moment. Chapter 446. The firelight lasted for a moment before it faded. The purple sea of fire slowly descended, and the figure within it appeared in front of Yin Nuoxing and the others. The figure that appeared was dressed in a black and white dress. Her slender and wide sleeves covered her slender hands, and her exposed shoulders reflected the light of the fire. Her short burgundy hair had 4 long black hair casually tied up by 4 red hairbands. Her young and tender face had a familiar cuteness. Because she had just woken up, her burgundy eyes were still a little dazed, but also a little lively. Stepping on the light purple sea of fire, Yishi gently landed. Only when her feet touched the incorporeal ground did Yishi stretch lazily. After a while, she lazily opened her eyes and looked at Yin Nuo and the others who were walking over. Her eyes spun a few times before she suddenly threw a confused look at them. Not far away, Yin Nuoxing's heart trembled slightly when he saw this look. He could not help but sigh softly. Is this the little Shi that you always talk about? Lan Xian ran 2 steps and stopped in front of Yishi. The two of them stared at each other, full of curiosity. Lan Xian happily hugged Yishi and patted her head. She smiled and said, "So cute." Yin Nuoxing shrugged. When Yishi was asleep, only Ziyi was still around. However, at that time, the two of them had not gotten to know each other very well. They had only met in the Sea of Fire and had even fought. After being played by Lan Xian for a while, Yishi pouted and looked at Yin Nuoxing, who had a helpless expression. She muttered, "Brother Nuo, who are these guys in your soul?" "This is a long story." Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly. He was still worried about how to introduce them. Could he just say that Ziyi, you have seen him before, Exen, is a soul, and Su Ming? Well, for now, he is just a sword. After a brief introduction, Yishi was still being held in Lan Xian's arms like a rag doll. For the sake of Yin Nuoxing, Lan Xian also endured and did not throw a tantrum. "Well, you two go ahead and catch up. We won't be the third wheel." Ziyi waved his hand and said as he walked. He glanced at Lan Xian, who stuck out her tongue and put Yishi down. She followed Ziyi, and the netherworld ruins soared to the side. Yin Nuoxing felt a little awkward when she saw the three of them leave the two of them behind. She scratched her head and saw she mumbling to herself as she fiddled with her hair that Lan Xian had messed up. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. When Yishi saw that Yin Nuoxing seemed to have a speech impediment, she couldn't help but sigh. She had no choice but to speak first. "I'm afraid it's been 6 or 7 years. I didn't expect this deep sleep to have lasted for another few years." Although she had been sleeping in Yin Nuoxing's soul, she could more or less sense what he had experienced. 6 years was a very small number in her life. In fact, it wasn't long, but it wasn't short either. She had hurriedly passed 1 year after another. "Brother Nuo hasn't changed at all. Even your appearance hasn't changed at all." Yishi slowly sat on the ground and hugged her knees. Her wine-red eyes stared at Yin Nuoxing with a smile as she said, "Ahem." Yin Nuoxing coughed dryly and sat down casually. He muttered, "You haven't changed either." Yishi took a light breath and drew a few circles on the ground with her small hand. She hesitated for a moment before saying, "Brother Nuo, you have problems with your body, right? How did you know?" Yin Nuoxing was at a loss for words for a moment when she pointed out his problem. "Although I was in a deep sleep, I knew a little about what happened to Brother Nuo when he was awake. However, there weren't many times like this. I was bitten by Ling Hongjian, and my soul should have been shattered directly. I didn't expect the soul-burning technique to save my life. Most importantly, Ling Hongjian actually stuffed me into Brother Nuo's soul. Otherwise, even with the soul-burning technique, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to hold on." Yishi smiled bitterly. She had faced so many challenges in life. Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but be shocked. So it was Ling Hongjian who saved little Shi's life back then. Yishi tilted her head and looked at Yin Nuoxing rather cutely. The latter also looked at her quietly. When Yishi blushed, she turned her gaze and looked at Ziyi and the others. She said softly, "I do have a Saint Technique array that can purify devil chi. However, it can only expel devil chi that invades from outside." Ziyi and the others, who were eavesdropping a few meters away, couldn't help but sigh in disappointment even though they had expected this. Yin Nuoxing also sighed heavily. His devil chi was born from his own body. "I'm sorry, Brother Nuo. I can't help you expel the devil chi in your body." Yishi lowered her small head and almost buried it in her knees. She muttered with some self-blame. Yin Nuoxing had gone to great lengths to help her repair her soul, but she couldn't help at all. Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing frowned. She crawled over on all fours and sat down behind Yishi. She stroked her head with her right hand and said softly, "It's fine. It's not little Shi's fault. This is expected. It's already great news that little Shi can wake up." Yishi raised her head and was about to say something when her body fell backwards. Her head fell on Yin Nuoxing's chest. The latter chuckled and said, "The road ahead is still very long. I'm only at the peak of Immortal 5th stage now. There's still a long way to go before I reach the devil rank. At most, I'll slow down my cultivation speed and solve the problem before that. Moreover, I still have the barrier breakthrough now." Yishi's heart warmed as Yin Nuoxing gently stroked her head. She nodded her small head. Not far away, Ziyi glanced at the two who were so harmonious that they looked like siblings. She sighed and retracted her gaze. She said softly, "The 8th grade divine rank array master hasn't withdrawn. I reckon the alchemist side won't have a solution either. In the end, we can only see if the light divine king has a solution. Lon Xian, and Su Ming both replied solemnly. Yin Nuoxing wasn't in a hurry, but they were. Suddenly, Zi felt a hand stroking her head. Zi turned her head and saw Yin Nuoxing looking at them with a faint smile. She said, "We'll go out first. If we wait for too long, that girl will be anxious again. As for my matter, you don't have to be anxious. It's useless to think too much. Let nature take its course. If there's a solution, there will be a solution. If there isn't, then it's up to fate." She patted Lon Xian's head again. Yin Nuoxing hesitated for a moment and said, "Xian, aren't you coming out? It seems that ever since the Tana's water god temple, you've been cooped up in my soul and won't come out." When Lon Xian heard that, she pursed her lips and smiled. However, she shook her head and said, "If there's nothing else, then Xian won't go out. I can still chat with Sister Su Ming and Sister Zi here. Besides, we have to keep an eye on chaos, well as you wish." Yin Nuoxing shook her head with a bitter smile. Then, she picked up the palm-sized pink little fellow from her head. When she saw that it was still so small, her bitter smile deepened. She placed it on Xian's head and said, "You've grown taller. I've always dreamed of the day when you'll be able to carry us and soar into the sky." Chirp. The little fellow stretched its wings and cried out. It seemed to be arguing with dissatisfaction. Everyone couldn't help but laugh. "Well, we're going out." She pulled Yishi. Rings of faint purple light immediately spread out from her body and quickly enveloped Yin Nuoxing and Ziyi. Then, the two of them swayed and disappeared from this soul world. Under the endless stars, specks of starlight suddenly gathered at the edge of the deep purple lake. The surging energy caused everyone who was training to be startled. Their gazes suddenly turned and saw a spatial crack slowly being torn apart. Soon after, a petite figure slowly walked out from within. "I've finally woken up. What a long sleep." Yishi immediately took a deep breath of fresh air after crawling out of the spatial crack. She stretched out her arms, and there was an intoxicated look on her young and adorable face. Yin Nuoxing, who had also woken up, heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Yishi, who was mischievous and had the temperament of a little girl. This was the Yishi he knew. It was so awkward when they met just now. This is the night god spring, so the energy just now was this. No wonder it healed my soul. After she heaved a sigh of relief, Yishi noticed the place where the stars were shining brightly. After her initial shock, she was overjoyed. She dived into the night god spring without saying anything. She couldn't help but murmur happily, "There's so much energy here. Maybe I can recover some of my strength." Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly as she watched She play with the water like a child. She couldn't help but shake her head. "Little star, who is she?" Yuanshi hurriedly asked as he looked at Yishi, who was swimming like a fish in the night god spring. Yin Nuoxing smiled and looked at Xian. The latter was startled for a moment. Then, realization dawned on him, and he said, "She's Miss Yishi?" Yin Nuoxing smiled and nodded. She briefly introduced Yishi to Yuan Shi and Nightmare. Then, she explained to Yao Hua and the others. After seeing the strange reactions of the others, Yin Nuoxing smiled faintly. Yuan Shi and the others probably couldn't imagine that she was once a high and mighty peak underworld emperor. "I suddenly remember what happened that day." Yao Hua smiled bitterly. They had seen Yishi before. Later, when they recognized Yin Nuoxing as Yusin, they found it strange that their little tail had disappeared. It turned out that she had gone to heal her soul. Now that she had come out, it reminded them of what happened in Yin City. Boss used the light element to hit the barrier. "We were almost killed." Lei Ming smiled bitterly. "That's right." Everyone nodded in agreement. Then, they said in unison, "That's why the light element isn't reliable at all." Yin Nuoxing and Yao Hua smiled bitterly at the same time. They couldn't control it well. Looking at the starry sky above her head, Yin Nuoxing pondered for a moment. After a while, she lowered her head and looked at the purple lake. She took a deep breath and raised her right hand. The purple night flame slowly rose. The temperature of the surrounding space suddenly soared. The sudden high temperature startled everyone. Yao Hua and the others who were nearby all rolled away. Yin Nuoxing shrunk her neck and smiled apologetically at everyone. Then, she restrained her expression and pressed her hand into the night god spring. Her evil spirit eye and 6 demonic wings unfolded at the same time. Boundless soul power spread out like a tide. Her right hand, holding the purple night flame, continuously absorbed the energy of the night god spring. With the support of the night god spring, the range of his soul strength had increased by several times. Perhaps it was because of the night god spring, but his soul strength wasn't affected as it flowed into the Evernight forest. Eternal night flame, where are you? His soul force rapidly spread out, gradually covering more than half of the eternal night forest. At this time, the expansion of his soul force gradually stopped. Even with the power of the night god spring, he could only spread his soul force to such a large area. There's a strange energy source in the north, but it's very strange. I can't find a source. Scratching his head, Yin Nuoxing turned his gaze to the north with a strange expression on his face. However, from the highest point of the god realm, all he could see was the starry sky. There's only a divergent path. Could it be that the energy source has been concealed? And this path is a parallel path. After discovering this even stranger thing, Yin Nuoxing could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Normally, the energy emitted by an energy source would be radiated in a circular shape. However, the way the energy was radiating, if you were to draw it in its entirety, it would be in a square shape. Let's go take a look. Chapter 447. The surging purple energy surged through his body like a raging wave. The energy that was frantically circulating within his body even emitted a thunderous roar. As the energy from the night god spring continued to pour into his body, the already swelling energy increased several times over. Every time the energy was about to reach a saturation point, there would be an indescribable force that would suppress the saturated energy. It was like a balloon that had been blown up and then burst, causing the swelling energy to deflate in an instant. The rolling thunder also stopped abruptly as the energy weakened. However, it didn't stop for long before the rumbling thunder started again. The energy from the night god spring seemed to be endless as it filled the whole. On the night god peak, one could see with the naked eye a purple energy whirlwind spiraling above the purple lake. There were also galaxies formed by the power of the stars falling from the star field. Endless rays of light flooded the area, so bright that it was almost impossible to open one's eyes. Is he cultivating? Why do I feel like the energy he's extracting is enough for me to advance to the demon rank? At the edge of the night god spring, everyone was forced to retreat from the lake because of the energy whirlwind. Yuanshi opened his eyes against the wind and stared at the figure in the center of the lake. He shouted at the top of his lungs so that his voice wouldn't be drowned out by the wind. Well, didn't he condense his energy into a crystal? It's natural that he needs a lot of energy to advance. But isn't this a bit too much? He just came out of seclusion not long ago, and he wants to advance again. Yao Hua also shouted at the top of his lungs, afraid that his voice would be torn apart by the wind. Nightmare shook his head. He opened his mouth to say something, but even he couldn't hear his own voice. His eyebrows trembled, and then he roared, "This isn't the energy needed to advance from the Immortal 52 transformation stage to the Immortal 6. Even a crystal doesn't need that much energy. I think there's something wrong with his body." Xian smiled bitterly. The wind blew her long purple hair behind her back like a piece of silk. The hair beside her ears also danced wildly, forcing her to use her hands to hold it down. She hesitated for a moment, and then roared. Little Star said, "He encountered a breakthrough barrier. He told us to ignore him. This is normal." Before they started cultivating, Yin Nuoxing had told them that there would be a huge commotion when they started cultivating, so they should be careful. Huh. Yao Hua opened his mouth in shock, but he suddenly swallowed a mouthful of wind and started coughing violently. Jining had to continue from the side. Even if it's a breakthrough barrier, what's up with that energy? Boom, 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 boom. There's even thunder. Are you having diarrhea? Yin. Calm Z, Yin smiled wryly. She wasn't sure either. Yin Nuashing had only told her to be careful and hadn't said anything special. Moreover, when it came to breaking through a barrier, let alone her, even the young elites present probably didn't know much about it. At most, they only knew what was going on. Buzz! While they were discussing, they were shocked to see a huge pillar of light condensed from the power of the stars descend from the sky. Then, it suddenly pounced on the frail figure above the lake. The terrifying starlight reminded them of the terrifying pillar of light they saw in the ghostly forest that day, the one that almost pierced through Sourcepeak City. Although it wasn't as terrifying now, it still made them retreat in horror. When the power of the stars descended, the energy hurricane above the night god spring became several times more violent. Everyone had no choice but to squat down or even lie on the ground to avoid being blown away by the wind. Nightmare, who was lying on the ground, was about to say something when he blinked and looked behind him at the protruding slope. He looked for a moment, then turned his head, took a deep breath, and roared, "Someone's climbing up!" Everyone cried out in surprise. Yuanshi hurriedly shouted, "Should we blast Little Star up? If there's someone, won't they be disturbed?" Nightmare hurriedly shook his head and roared. The aura that suddenly appeared just now, it wasn't there before. He'll probably come up in half an hour. We have to hurry him up. It's almost time for us to retreat. If others see us monopolizing the night god spring, there will be a lot of unnecessary things. Everyone smiled bitterly when they heard this. How could they make him hurry up? It was probably because the commotion caused by Yin Nuashing's advancement was too great, and the people below were a little anxious. When the night god peak appeared, the shock wave had knocked everyone unconscious except for Yin Nuashing, which gave them the upper hand. They didn't expect that someone would come up to the night god peak in just over 2 hours. Suddenly, Xian realized that someone was missing. When he looked carefully, he couldn't help but cry out, "Where's Yishi? She couldn't have been blown away, right?" Yao Hua muttered with a bitter smile. Yishi was so small, so she must have been blown away by the wind. Everyone smiled bitterly. When Nightmare screamed that someone was climbing up, he thought that Yin Nuashing would stop very soon. Unexpectedly, the power of the stars and the energy hurricane became more and more intense and violent. The terrifying energy permeated the top of the night god peak, forcing everyone to release their energy to take root in the ground so that they wouldn't be blown away by the wind. The violent energy kept pushing everyone back. In less than a minute, there were dozens of scratches on the ground. Even with everyone's combined efforts, the energy barrier was still pushed back dozens of meters. Just when everyone thought that they would be pushed off the night god peak, the energy that had expanded to the extreme suddenly shrank, and the majestic pressure suddenly disappeared. Even the violent wind and the pillar of starlight disappeared in an instant. Bang, bang, bang. The moment the expanding energy disappeared, a loud sound like a drum suddenly came from the center of the purple lake, causing everyone to turn their gazes in shock. They saw Yin Nuashing slowly kneeling on the surface of the lake, boiling hot steam rising from her body. Everyone looked at each other, and in a flash, they flew out. In just a few breaths, they rushed to Yin Nuashing's side and slowly stopped beside her. Only when they got closer could they feel Yin Nuashing's slightly chaotic aura. There was even a trace of brilliant golden-red blood at the corner of her mouth. This situation was exactly like a failure in advancement. However, there were no sequelae of failure like ordinary people. For example, the drop in level caused by the energy fluctuation was too strong. Xian hurriedly knelt down as well. Her lily-white hand gently stroked Yin Nuashing's back as she asked nervously, "Are you all right?" Taking a deep breath, Yin Nuashing shook his head and slowly stood up while holding her hand. He let out a long sigh and said, "We failed. Seriously, the night god spring was supposed to help me break through the barrier. The night god spring only has a chance of helping people who have been stuck for too long break through the bottleneck. How long has it been since you came out of seclusion? I only said that there was a chance. There was a chance. Hearing her words, Z hurriedly pushed the blame away. Don't worry. You can't rush the path of cultivation. Isn't it just breaking through the barrier? With Little Star's physique, there definitely won't be a problem. Yuanshi patted Yin Nuoxing's shoulder and comforted her. Breaking through the barrier? A somewhat tender voice suddenly sounded from the side, causing everyone to look over. Just as they lowered their heads, they saw ripples suddenly appear on the calm surface of the lake. Following that, a small wine-red head slowly emerged from the water, giving everyone a fright. They thought that this fellow had been blown off the night god peak. They didn't expect that she had been under the lake all along. Shaking her head, Yishi shook off the purple lake water that flowed down her little face. She raised her head and said, "Big brother Nuo, did you encounter the barrier?" Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing nodded with a bitter expression. Others could only encounter the barrier at the initial god stage. He, on the other hand, encountered the barrier at the 52nd immortal transformation stage. Furthermore, because his energy carrier had been condensed into a crystal, the difficulty of breaking through the barrier was even more difficult. Oh, hearing this, Yishi tilted her little head. The expression on her little face changed slightly for a while. After a while, she emerged from the water. With a flip of her wide sleeves, she took out an irregular crystal the size of a head. Holding it with both hands, she handed it to Yin Nuoxing. "Big brother Nuo, this is for you." As soon as this irregular crystal appeared, the energy of the night god spring suddenly boiled. A surging tide of energy spread outwards. The huge amount of energy emitted caused Yin Nuoxing's expression to become serious. His mouth opened and closed. "What is this?" The night god spring has been deposited at the bottom of the lake for many years. No one has visited the bottom of the lake for many years, so a large amount of energy crystals have formed. This one is the largest. I've just spent a lot of effort to pull it out from the bottom of the lake. I don't know if it's useful, Yishi said softly. With this crystal, it was equivalent to having a mobile night god spring. If they encountered a bottleneck in the future, taking it out would greatly increase their chances of breaking through. Furthermore, even without its special effects, it was a huge source of energy. The pure energy could be used by anyone to speed up their cultivation. What? There's one at the bottom of the lake. Then what are we waiting for? Hearing that there was such a treasure at the bottom of the lake, Yao Hua's saliva almost flowed out. Then, he made a diving motion. Before he could jump, Lei Ming and the others hurriedly pulled him back. They laughed bitterly in unison. "We don't know how deep this lake is. There's no time now. It's about time for us to leave." "No, let me go. I'm going to pull one out." Yao Hua raised his voice and looked like he wouldn't give in no matter what. Yin Nuoxing pinched a slender spike with 2 fingers. As soon as she touched it, the familiar energy of the night god spring crazily surged into her body, causing her to tremble slightly. She resisted the urge to refine the spike and picked it up. After examining it for a while, she smiled gently and put it back in Yishi's hand. She rubbed her head and smiled. "Little Lucky Star, you picked up something good as soon as you came out. However, I won't be able to use this thing for a while. I know my own condition better than anyone else. This isn't something that can be solved with more energy. The barrier of the spirit receiving godly physique has to be solved with the method of the spirit receiving godly physique." Yin Nuoxing smiled mysteriously, causing everyone to be confused. The method of the spirit receiving godly physique? When Zi heard this, she put down a teacup in her hand. Her red lips pulled up into a charming smile. This brat finally understood. Yes, the unique method of the spirit receiving godly physique. Yin Nuoxing smiled, but didn't say anything. She walked towards the other end of the night god spring with her hands behind her back. When everyone saw this, they looked at each other in confusion before hurriedly following her. Yin Nuoxing slowly spread out her soul power. When she sensed that there was no one else's aura in the direction of the night god peak, she nodded and walked to the edge of the cliff. She raised her head and looked at the starry sky that was within reach. Then she took a deep breath. Her throat moved a little, and she slowly shifted her gaze downwards. She didn't know how far down below, but she still couldn't see that patch of green. "Oh, I'm afraid of heights." Lei Ming looked down. His legs went weak, and he almost fell on his butt. A dignified immortal rank cultivator is actually afraid of heights. Nightmare glanced at him and sneered. Yao Hua looked down and said helplessly, "Your legs are trembling too. You're obviously afraid too." "I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. Anyway, if I jump down to a certain height, the wind element will be able to gather again." Nightmare shouted agitatedly. Yao Hua had exposed her. She was so embarrassed that she flew into a rage. Save some energy for the screaming feast later. Yin Nuoxing sighed helplessly. Even though she was used to excitement, she still couldn't stand this height. "You're not really going to jump, are you?" Yao Hua smiled bitterly. He looked at the ground that he couldn't see, and cold sweat was about to break out. He quickly wiped his forehead and said with a fawning smile, "That, Miss Yi Shi, can I borrow your spiritual world for a while?" Yi Shi, who was once a Netherworld emperor, naturally had a spiritual world that only Netherworld kings had. "However, my soul power has just recovered, so I can't open my spiritual world for a while. I still need to rest for a while." Yi Shi shook her head emotionlessly. Unexpectedly, she winked mischievously at Yin Nuoxing, causing the latter to smile bitterly. This little girl was really naughty. Yao Hua smiled bitterly and couldn't help but roar at the sky. "The heavens want me dead. You're a real man. What can't be solved with a jump? If there is, then jump off the night god peak." Yin Nuoxing calmly patted him on the shoulder and said in a serious tone. As soon as she finished speaking, everyone saw golden chains emerge from his windbreaker and naturally wrap around their waists. They even tightened. Is this how you lifted us up just now?" Nightmare laughed dryly. "Yes, is there a problem?" Yin Nuoxing raised her eyebrows and glanced at him. Then, she carried Yi Shi in her arms. Xian naturally walked to her side and hugged her. Everyone smiled bitterly. They were showing off their love again. Yin Nuoxing shrugged nonchalantly. He was already used to it. "Just let her be. Come, let's count to 3. Jump down from Night God Peak. We'll be brothers and sisters for the rest of our lives," Yin Nuoxing suddenly said. Everyone was startled, and then they all laughed bitterly. 3. Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath as she tightened her grip on the 2 people in her arms. 2. Yao Hua murmured softly. He gritted his teeth as if he was about to be executed. 1. Nightmare pushed his forehead with one hand and laughed maniacally. Soon after, more than a dozen figures leaped up in unison, and a terrifying feeling of weightlessness followed. I think we should shout leap of faith. Get lost. Chapter 448. At the center of the distorted space-time, a gigantic black pagoda, as tall as the sky, stood quietly under the starry sky. If one were to look closely, the black pagoda did not appear to be very regular. Moreover, the bottom of the pagoda was abnormally thick. It was a mountain as tall as the sky. At the top of the mountain, where even the air was almost frozen, a dozen black spots suddenly fell side by side. The bone-chilling wind whistled past their ears. It was as cold as a knife as it scraped past their cheeks, causing the dozen-plus black spots to involuntarily cry out. There were even some who cried out at the top of their lungs. No, they roared out. Their earth-shaking, sorrowful cries transformed into a sad song at the center of this distorted space. The terrifying feeling of weightlessness grew stronger and stronger, as if all the blood in their bodies was pressed to their backs. The fierce wind blew their cheeks, and they could hear indistinct screams. "So cold, huh? I'm going to pee." The man in the bright white robe suddenly roared. "Disgusting. Scram. Pervert." As soon as he finished speaking, a few angry roars sounded beside him, and they wanted to kick him into the sky. They seem to be in the sky right now. Shout all you want. No one will save you even if you scream yourself hoarse. Once you jump, there's no turning back. Nightmare laughed crazily. And then he laughed maniacally. In half an hour, we'll fall to a place where we can use the wind element. If you faint, please prepare your last words. Thunder, break your throat, break your throat. Yaohua, scram. Everyone was terrified. Half an hour? The pain on their faces and bodies, and the suffocating feeling in their lungs made them feel like every second was as long as an era. Yin Nuashing was relatively calm. He and Xian had already experienced this when they climbed up. Although their bodies were a little uncomfortable, it wasn't to the extent that they couldn't endure it. His 6 wings had already extended from his back, wrapping around Xian and Yishi. His eyes were looking straight ahead. His soul power had sensed that this strange energy source was right where he was looking. However, it was still the endless sky, and he could not see anything. Below him, he could vaguely make out a little bit of green, and he did not know how far it would take to reach the ground. He turned around and looked at the different starry sky that was gradually getting further away. It had already been more than 10 minutes since he jumped down from the 9th heaven. He was probably at the 6th heaven now. Of course, this was just a guess. Yin Nuashing could only sigh helplessly as she listened to Yao Hua and the others try to divert her attention. She glanced at Yuan Shi and saw that the latter was still calm, but his twitching cheeks showed that he wasn't calm at all. Bang! The sudden loud noise shocked everyone. Their eardrums buzzed, and the world seemed to have quieted down all of a sudden. They were not prepared to break through the sound barrier at all, and their eardrums almost burst. Suddenly, he felt the girl in his arms hugging him tighter. Yin Nuashing also patted the person wrapped in his wings and sighed softly. Just as he was about to say something, his eyes suddenly widened, and he stared straight ahead. He saw an unusually large black mountain flashing in front of him. Its height was almost the same as their current position. This is the position of the 5th heaven. Yin Nuashing sucked in a breath of extremely cold air in shock. He had never seen such a tall mountain range, nor had he heard of it. However, the black mountain only flashed for a moment. Yin Nuashing also thought that it was an illusion and did not investigate further. After breaking through the sound barrier, everyone closed their mouths and chose to communicate with their souls. At this uncontrollable speed, they couldn't even hear what they said. Huaji, do you sense any blazing energy source? Yin Nuashing took a moment to look at the red-haired girl not far away on her right and asked through her soul, Huaji, do you sense any blazing energy source? Huaji was startled by the sudden call. She turned her gaze and saw Yin Nuashing's purple-gold eyes staring at her seriously. Only then did she breathe a sigh of relief. After thinking for a while, she shook her head and said, I don't sense it. There is very little fire elemental energy in the Eternal Night Forest. Even the amount of fire elemental energy floating between heaven and earth is not very much. Yin Nuashing nodded. There was no other direction. They could only look at the strange energy source. After a long time, a cyan energy suddenly rose in her heart. She was already used to the feeling of energy suddenly pouring into her body. Yin Nuashing naturally knew what this cyan energy was. The 6 wings in front of her slowly unfolded. The 6 wings allowed her to sense elemental energy several times better than ordinary people, especially the wind elemental energy. Therefore, as soon as she came out of the 1st heaven, Yin Nuashing could sense the wind elemental energy. However, the others were not so fast. The 6 wings slowly unfolded to a size of 10 zhang. The thin and negligible wind elemental energy in the air was sucked in by her like a water pump. However, she did not make her body stop abruptly. The golden chains were still wrapped around everyone. If she stopped now, she was afraid that she would break them in half. The fine wind elemental energy slowly condensed and gradually condensed into a huge mass of cyan energy. Then, through the wings, the wind elemental energy slowly spread around her body, causing their speed to slowly decrease. Wind elemental energy. I finally found it. As soon as this energy appeared, Yao Hua exclaimed. Everyone was also stunned. They could actually hear her. However, by the time they reacted, their speed had already decreased by a lot. Phew! We're alive. Lei Ming wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and patted his chest with lingering fear. When they safely descended to a certain height and the wind elemental energy had already spread throughout the space, Yin Nuoxing slowly stopped and retracted her golden chains. Her 6 wings also shrunk from 10 zhang to a normal size of 20 zhang. Xian also slowly came out of her arms. She patted her plump chest and sighed softly. She stared straight ahead, the sky in the north. Then, she looked up at the starry sky. She had turned a large area of space into a space that was close to the star domain. They were still under the distorted space and time of the starry sky. The methods of the ancient deities are really incredible. The little koala bear that was still hanging in Yin Nuoxing's arms also looked up at the starry sky. It saw through the mystery of the sky at a glance and muttered, "Ancient deities?" Everyone's expression froze. Distorted space and time. This isn't the starry sky we're in. It's filled with the aura of an ancient torrent of time. After devouring Zero's illusory time, lost domain, although she couldn't directly use the power of time like he could, Yin Nuoxing had become more sensitive to the flow of time around her. Looking down at the light green ground that was still far away, Yin Nuoxing waved her hand and took the lead to fly towards the sky in the north. Everyone hurriedly followed. It was said that the northernmost part of the eternal night forest was the edge of the realm of the gods, the edge of this planar world. If one jumped out of the edge, they would arrive at the star domain. However, very few people had ever been to this so-called edge, so no one knew what it looked like. Yin Nuoxing and the others were also very curious about this. High up in the sky, Yin Nuoxing felt that the suppression of the light element had disappeared at some point. It should be said that the suppression of the elements had disappeared silently. He didn't say much. The light element permeated the air and enveloped everyone. As soon as he made this move, everyone nervously moved closer. However, Yin Nuoxing didn't increase his speed to the maximum. He only increased his speed by a lot. While flying high up in the sky, Qin Yin suddenly exclaimed in surprise, causing Yin Nuoxing to slow down a lot. Then, he turned around and saw her startled expression. He asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" Qin Yin opened her mouth and looked at the unique calmness on Yin Nuoxing's handsome face. She took a deep breath and gently stroked the red crystal hanging on her belt. A white light flashed, and a blue crystal ball the size of a fist appeared. This blue crystal ball was currently emitting a bright light. It was very bright under the starry night sky. Guide bead? Yin Nuoxing only took a glance at it. Then, he thought of the previous matter and thought of something. Qin Yin was stunned for a moment after being seen through by him. She rolled her eyes at him and said, If I hadn't mentioned this thing before, I would have thought that you had seen my Qin family's guide bead. It should be used by your Qin family to search for an item in the forest of eternal night. Looking at the reaction of this so-called guide bead, it should be getting closer, Yin Nuoxing said. He was only guessing. You've guessed everything. Qin Yin smiled bitterly. It wasn't hard to guess, but he hit the nail on the head. She really suspected that Yin Nuoxing knew what the Qin family was thinking. Moreover, Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath and looked up at her. He said softly, "There's a 50% chance that the item you're looking for is the same as the item I'm looking for now, or it's in the same place." Qin Yin wrinkled her nose when she heard this. Then, she smiled calmly and said, "When that time comes, I hope that young Master Yun will show mercy. It's useless to pretend to be obedient." Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes and said, "Let's wait and see. We'll talk about it when we get there. I don't think many people know about this." Qin Yin nodded. She didn't want the item her Qin family was looking for to coincide with what Yin Nuoxing was looking for. If it really was, she didn't know what to do. On one hand, it was her own family, and on the other hand, it was someone she was indebted to. As the energy source he sensed with his soul got closer and closer, Yin Nuoxing suddenly changed his direction and dashed towards the ground at an angle. His soul energy was also magnified infinitely at this moment, as if he had inexhaustible energy. Only when they arrived at the source of energy that was closest to the fault did Yin Nuoxing suddenly land on the ground. Everyone also slowly landed on the ground with him, landing in the forest. Layers of green surrounded them. This place was so quiet that there was no sound at all. The starry sky in the sky still spanned the entire sky. There was no end to it. There's nothing here. Yao Hua couldn't calm down. He rubbed his feet and slowly walked around. All he could see was trees. Qin Yin also raised the guide bead in her hand. Its light was unprecedentedly bright. Yin Nuoxing sucked in a deep breath. His soul power had detected the source of the energy. It was right here, right in front of him. It was 1 foot away from him. He carefully stretched out his hand and touched the foot away. He thought he would see the space ripple like water, but his hand just waved in the air, and he didn't touch anything. Qin Yin knew that he might know something, so she copied him and waved the guide bead in the direction he had just touched. However, she didn't touch anything, and the space didn't change at all. A hidden space. It's a space array unique to this eternal night forest. A naturally woven array is really rare. Just when the two were at a loss, Yi Shi, who was lying in Yin Nuoxing's arms, suddenly said softly. Her eyes were bright as she looked at the space in front of her, as if she had seen something. A hidden space? Yin Nuoxing narrowed his eyes and clenched his right hand into a fist. A purplish-black light flashed, and a huge sword suddenly appeared in the space, held in Yin Nuoxing's hand. Yin Nuoxing grabbed the Netheruin sword and spun around. He took a deep breath, grabbed the huge sword with both hands, and slashed down fiercely at the space in front of him. Crack! Suddenly, the sound of glass shattering resounded through the air. Everyone was shocked and hurriedly turned their gazes over. Then they saw that the nether void sword had split open the space a foot in front of Yin Nuoxing. There were even cracks spreading out like spider webs in the surroundings. As the space in front of them was cut open, their surroundings changed slightly. There was nothing in front of them before, but a medium-sized cave suddenly appeared, just big enough for 2 people to enter side by side. Chapter 449. The sudden appearance of the cave attracted everyone's attention. Qin Yin and Nightmare appeared at the entrance of the cave in a flash and stood side by side with Yin Nuoxing. This cave was also a little strange. There was no mountain wall behind the cave, and if one looked at it from the back, they would only see a ripple of space cut open by a sword. There was only a strange entrance. Is there really something here? But I just passed by here, and I didn't bump into anything. Yao Hua slowly walked to the entrance of the cave and scratched his head in confusion. Yi Shi jumped down from Yin Nuoxing's body, held his hand, and said softly, Brother Nuoxing didn't bump into anything either. We were able to find this because of the Netherworld Ruins sword's ability to break space. If it were someone else, they would have to be at least a god who has accurately grasped the power of space to be able to break through here. When the entrance of the cave appeared, the guiding bead in Qin Yan's hand suddenly burst with a dazzling light. Then, it fell silent again, which made her a little confused. Was this the place, or was it not? It feels like it's broken. Qin Yan shook her head as she shook the bead. Why don't we go in and take a look? No matter what, if we see a cave that suddenly opens up, we should at least take a look, Devil Nightmare suggested. If there really is something special, we'll make a killing. Okay, let's go in and take a look. Yin Nuoxing nodded and took the lead to walk in with Xian. As for the Netherworld Ruins sword, they didn't know where this cave led to, so it was better to use it as a precaution. Hey, wait for us. Seeing Qin Yin and Nightmare walk into the cave, Yao Hua and the others looked at each other and hurriedly ran into the cave as well. As everyone entered the cave, the space that had been cut open slowly closed, and the entrance of the cave disappeared. After entering the cave, their vision didn't seem to be pitch black. The surrounding mountain walls emitted a faint light, allowing everyone to see the inside of the cave clearly. Looking ahead, there was an even more spacious passageway. Even if a dozen people squeezed in together, it wouldn't seem crowded. The cave behind us is gone. Jining looked back and cried out in surprise. Yin Nuoxing also looked back, but Yishi said indifferently, "It's fine. The spatial breakpoint is still there. It's just temporarily sealed. Big Brother Nuo has a way to open it." Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly. Yin Nuoxing's spiritual power finally captured the broken square energy source as she walked along the spacious passageway. After walking for a while, a flight of stairs suddenly appeared in front of him. The change was very sudden, as if it had suddenly appeared in front of him. However, the space in front of him was very spacious, as if it was a small world. PFFF, the purple pattern on his chest suddenly lit up, and the purple night flame in his lower abdomen started beating violently. Yin Nuoxing, who had experience, naturally knew that this was the reaction of the purple night flame when it encountered another divine flame. I don't think it's that simple. Since the eternal night flame has been here for so long without being taken away, there must be a reason for it. Sensing Yin Nuoxing's joy, Zai couldn't help but pour a bucket of cold water on his head. Yin Nuoxing shrugged. That seemed to be the case. However, it was enough to know that the eternal night flame was here. As long as it was still here, there must be a way to take it away. More than a dozen people walked up the abrupt stone stairs in an orderly manner. Xian looked at the neat and uniform stairs under her feet with a worried expression. Seeing her worried expression, Yin Nuoxing smiled and said softly, "It's fine. I'll know in advance if there's any danger." Xian nodded. It wasn't that she was worried about danger. It was just that the traces of the stairs and the hole seemed to be man-made. Someone must have been here and left behind a series of masterpieces. After walking for an unknown period of time, the spacious space around them quietly shrank to a height of only 100 feet. The mountain walls on both sides also slowly closed in and finally became only 10 meters wide. And just as the space finally stopped at this scale, Yin Nuoxing and the others also stopped in their tracks and looked up in astonishment. In front of them, a huge door formed by a formation and an energy matrix had suddenly appeared. A door again. Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes. He had opened many underground doors. Although this was the first time he saw a door formed by a formation, his gaze immediately locked onto the formation in the middle of the door. That formation seemed to be the one that opened the door. It was a dark black formation that emitted a terrifying black light, as if it could devour the surrounding light. The originally bright space was now somewhat dim. A forbidden formation. Moreover, its grade seems to be a little high. There's a small part missing in the middle. If we connect it, the door will probably open. After Yishi finished speaking, she was about to borrow Yin Nuoxing's evil spirit eye. Just as she turned around, she heard the latter sigh. "No, this isn't a forbidden formation." Yin Nuoxing shook his head. His eyes widened unknowingly, causing everyone to be slightly stunned. "It's not a forbidden formation?" Yishi was stunned. She turned her small eyes and stared seriously at the dark formation. After sensing it carefully for a while, her small body trembled slightly. She muttered, "This really isn't the smell of a forbidden formation." She was used to the black color of a forbidden formation. She actually recognized it with a single glance. After sensing it carefully, she could feel that it was different from a normal forbidden formation. It didn't have the forbidden power. This small difference could be overlooked even by a formation grandmaster. However, Yin Nuoxing, thinking of this, Yishi couldn't help but turn her head and look at Yin Nuoxing, who was holding her hand. How did he recognize it? Because Yin Nuoxing sighed bitterly. He took 2 steps forward and looked up at the huge formation door. He let go of Yishi's small hand and pressed lightly in the air. A dark formation quickly condensed under his palm. Whoosh! As soon as the black formation appeared, a monstrous demonic aura suddenly erupted. It swept in all directions like a storm. The ear-piercing sound of the wind blew past everyone's ears. The sudden storm shocked everyone who was unprepared. By the time they reacted, they had already been blown away. After stabilizing their bodies, they looked at the center of the black storm in bewilderment. One by one, they pulled out their weapons, afraid that Yin Nuoxing would be like that time in the Ghost Chi Forest. I've seen this formation before. Yin Nuashing said the second half of his sentence. The black formation in his palm was almost exactly the same as the one on the door. The pattern and the smell, but the latter didn't have such a terrifying demonic aura. When Yin Nuashing was still in Yuyin City, he saw it in the strange encyclopedia of plants in the divine realm in his hand. It was the formation that had erupted with a terrifying demonic aura and alarmed Jin Wang and the others. However, at that time, the formation he used wasn't that powerful. It was only after he advanced to the 52nd cycle of the immortal realm that he was able to erupt with such a violent demonic aura. He slowly lifted the array under his palm and moved it in front of the array door. He slowly enlarged it until it was the same size as the array door. Only then did he slowly stop. A formation that contains demonic aura? Yishi's expression was uncertain. Among everyone, only she and Xian, who had a special constitution, hadn't been blown away. She stood beside Yin Nuashing and looked at the terrifying black formation. Her willowy eyebrows furrowed in confusion. I've studied formations for hundreds of thousands of years, but I haven't seen many formations that contain demonic aura. Yishi muttered. Yin Nuashing also shook his head and said, I saw this formation in a book and copied it with an evil spirit. A book? Xian was confused. It's the book I usually read. Encyclopedia of Plants in the Divine Realm. However, it's not just that. Yin Nuashing shook his head and didn't explain clearly. Through the formation that Yin Nuashing had woven, one could see that the formation on the door was missing a part. It wasn't just the middle part. Even the corners were missing. Perhaps it's waiting for someone to open it. Yin Nuashing's eyes trembled slightly as he recalled the words that Violet Knight had once said outside the god's ruin. His chest felt a little stuffy, and the scene in front of him started to blur. He couldn't even see his own hands clearly. Again? Yin Nuashing was shocked. He fiercely bit the tip of his tongue and hurriedly manipulated his nearly unconscious hands to pull Yishi and Xian in front of him. His dazzling eyes stared at the two Mei Mao, whose eyes were filled with shock. A strand of spiritual energy that was barely hanging on to life shot out from his eyes and burrowed into their eyes. I've always been controlled by this memory fragment. This time, Yin Nuashing smiled wickedly. This time, he was going to forcefully bring the two of them in to observe. As soon as the strand of spiritual energy burrowed into their minds, Yin Nuashing subconsciously raised his right hand. His vision turned black, and before his consciousness was about to shut down, he heard the two girls' nervous cries. Last one. I just need to activate this. His blurry consciousness slowly woke up. When he opened his eyes, he saw an azure formation about 3 meters wide spinning in front of him. He reached out his hand and pressed it against the formation. He could feel energy continuously flowing into the formation in front of him. This place seemed to be a collapsed ruin. There were many stones and broken building fragments scattered around. Is this really enough? He heard a doubtful voice. From the voice, it wasn't hard to tell that it belonged to a young man. It's been so many years. You've also questioned the old monster for so many years. When have you ever seen him make a mistake? A faint laughter that was as light as a silver bell came from the side. The young man's voice faltered. Then he muttered, I'm not worried. Furthermore, this runic magic array is already in such a terrible state. Can it really be used to send messages to the distant starry sky? The young man's voice was a little rough, and it sounded like the person speaking was a burly man. This matter concerns the realm of the gods. We have no other choice. The first voice chuckled. Yin Nuashing was startled. The owner of this voice was actually himself. Sigh. Following that, a few heavy sighs were heard, causing Yin Nuashing, who was watching from the side, to be shocked. He really wanted to turn his head to see who those people were, but his gaze was locked onto the formation in front of him and did not move. Buzz. The slender and white right hand slowly pushed the array forward. Then, Yin Nuashing saw that behind the array, there was a metal device that looked like a huge crystal. It suddenly lit up with a brilliant azure light. Then, the crystal slowly rose a little. At the top, there were 4 bright azure marks. The metal object also slowly split into 4 pieces and separated a little. Then a brilliant white light of energy shot into the sky. The energy beam was like an aurora that illuminated the world. It shot straight up into the sky and into the star field. Strands of energy rose from the crystal and converged into the energy beam in a spiral shape, making it even more resplendent and enormous. The true suffering of the realm of the gods has only just begun. Yin Nuoxing looked up at the white light used to send messages. Then she murmured sorrowfully, Chapter 450. Yin Nuoxing's line of sight was filled with white light, as if she was staring directly at the sun, so she couldn't see anything. After a long time, the white light that filled her vision slowly weakened, and what appeared in front of her again was a slightly dim underground world. The huge array in front of her had been open for a long time, and the array with monstrous demonic aura had also disappeared. After the array door opened, a spacious square appeared. Standing in the middle of the square was a huge metal device. The obsidian-like metal platform was dim and lightless, and the crystal-like metal device was quietly standing on the platform at this time. A thick layer of dust had dyed it a thin yellowish-brown color. It was unknown how many years it had been placed there. The metal device that I saw on the memory fragment, stopping in front of the huge obsidian-like metal platform, Yin Nuoxing looked up at the metal crystal that was hundreds of feet tall and took a light breath. That's the memory fragment that little star often mentioned. Xian and Yi, she looked at each other after walking lightly to Yin Nuoxing's side. The 2 women had a somewhat complicated look in their eyes. Why can we see it? Yishi asked, puzzled. She also learned a little about Yin Nuoxing's memory fragment during her deep sleep. I suddenly thought of it. Yin Nuoxing scratched her head, shrugged at the 2, and said, using a wisp of mental strength to temporarily connect our minds together, we can see the memory fragment from my perspective. This is also something that I just thought of. After speaking, Yin Nuoxing looked at Yi Shi and asked with some hope, can you think of anything? Yi Shi saw her looking over, lowered her little head, and gently rubbed her 2 slender little fingers. Yin Nuoxing didn't want to disturb her, so she could only observe the huge metal platform and the device. What a huge metal device! Behind them, Yao Hua and the others also walked in. They first glanced at the 3 of them, then sized up this place. What happened? Yuan Shi patted Yin Nuoxing's shoulder and transmitted his voice to her. When he first saw that the 3 of them seemed a little strange, although he was worried, he didn't see anything wrong with them. Now that they seemed to have recovered, he couldn't hold back his curiosity. Yin Nuoxing smiled and shook her head. She pointed at her temple and revealed an expression that said, you know what I mean. When Yuan Shi saw this, he suddenly understood. He knew about the memory fragments of the former. This is a metal device from ancient times. Nightmare, who had been squatting, suddenly jumped up. He was so excited that it was as if he had discovered a new continent. Everyone was shocked. How do you know it's an ancient device? Yao Hua glanced at him with a puzzled look. Then he followed Lin Li's example and squatted down. When he saw the complicated patterns on the obsidian platform, he felt like his head was about to explode. I've seen this type of metal device in the Nightwalker Alliance. I've seen the patterns before. The Great Elder said that it's an ancient device. Nightmare said excitedly. Nightmare Devil said excitedly. However, he suddenly sighed heavily, causing everyone to be confused. He then said, actually, I'm quite interested in this kind of metal device. However, this is an art. Was lost in ancient times long ago. I haven't seen this kind of thing until now. When he said the word art, Nightmare was very excited. It seemed that he really liked this kind of thing. According to some of the knowledge I've crammed from ancient books, this metal device, should be used for communication. Moreover, it's so huge and it's so far away. Nightmare said again. Yin Nuoxing spat out a mouthful of water. Xian and Yi Shi were also a little surprised. The 3 of them had indeed heard from the person in the memory fragments that this device was used for communication. Moreover, it was used to send messages to distant stars. If we can find the original coordinates, we might be able to find out where the message was sent. As he spoke, Nightmare was so excited that he lay on the ground. He wanted nothing more than to dig his eyes out and stick them on the dusty platform. Seeing his fanatical appearance, Yin Nuoxing's forehead broke out in a cold sweat. It was as if he could see Nightmare's fanatical expression when they first met. After laughing bitterly for a while, he felt his sleeve being tugged. He turned his gaze, only to see Yishi shaking her head and transmitting a sound transmission to him. The amount of information in that memory fragment is too little. I can't find any relevant information from it. Brother Nuo said at that time that the suffering in the realm of the gods should be a major event related to the realm of the gods. Yishi scratched her 4 strands of black hair in distress. She couldn't think of anything no matter how hard she racked her brain. Ugh. Yishi shook her little head in distress. The more she thought about it, the more she felt like her head was heating up. Her little face was red from holding it in. All right, don't think about it anymore. You're hurting your little brain. Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly. He picked Yishi up and rubbed her wine-red hair with his right hand, forcibly interrupting her thoughts. But I think I know something about it. I just can't remember it right now. He thought that Yishi would stop thinking about it. He didn't expect her to become even more conflicted. Then take your time to think about it. Don't be in such a hurry. Yin Nuoxing gently patted her head and shook his head helplessly. Yin Nuoxing shifted her gaze away from the huge metal device and looked around. After thinking for a while, she began to walk around the huge platform. When Xian saw this, he also began to walk around it. They didn't know how far they had walked from the cave, but they didn't see any other entrances that led Yin Nuoxing and the others to this place. After opening the formation door, they arrived at this huge space. Other than this heavy metal device, there was nothing else. The surrounding mountain walls were also completely sealed off. A faint fluorescent light illuminated this huge space. The mountain walls that were emitting a faint fluorescent light weren't as cold as they imagined. They were faintly warm and very hard. Unless he used 2 divine weapons, it would be completely impossible for him to break open this mountain wall with his strength alone. When he saw Yin Nuoxing and the others return after walking around, She went up to them and asked, "Did you find anything?" Yin Nuoxing sighed and shook her head. She stared at the mountain wall to the side and said, "There's no entrance, nor any mechanism. It can only be this huge metal device." Yin Nuoxing let out a long sigh. She nodded. However, when he saw Nightmare's inch-by-inch exploration, his cheeks couldn't help but twitch a few times. The latter's toad-like posture made everyone not know whether to laugh or cry. The dust was blown to the side by him and piled up into a small pile. "Zai, can you sense it?" Yin Nuoxing had no choice but to call out to her. "I can't sense it. Eternal Night, Flame, isn't here." In the spiritual world, Zai placed the book in her hand on the pillow beside her. She stretched her body and kicked the blanket to the side. Her soft body stretched out, a beautiful curve that made one's blood boil. Seeing her lazy appearance, Yin Nuoxing didn't know what to say. But that metal device should be the key. It's been preserved very well. It makes me wonder if it's really passed down from ancient times, Zai said lazily as she picked up the blanket and pulled it over her body. "The aura of the great samsara that you mentioned before?" Yin Nuoxing asked. "Yes, but it was only once. However, that kid was so sure that it was an ancient metal device, so I couldn't refute him. The aura of the great samsara can also be blocked. Perhaps these strange-looking mountain walls have some special energy that blocks the aura left behind by the great samsara," Zai said casually as she lazily opened the book that she had tossed aside and glanced at it. "All right." Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly. After thinking for a moment, she asked with some hope, "Do you know how to use this metal device?" "I do." Yin Nuoxing was startled. Even if it's an ancient metal device, the energy that drives it is still the energy within the body. This communication device contains many spatial runes and spatial formations. It has also been modified by someone. It seems like it could be used as a teleportation gate, Zai said lazily. flipping over. Her 2 feet were undulating on the bed as she continued. If you can find the teleportation gate's opening point, you should be able to go to the place you want to go. Hearing this, Yun Nuashing nodded her head in confusion. Seeing her rolling around on the bed in boredom, Zai couldn't help but frown. The evil spirit eyes slowly opened, and a group of tiny formations suddenly appeared in the air. Then, they gathered together in an orderly manner and covered the area in front of the eyes. The opening of the evil spirit eye was noticed by everyone. Turning their heads, they saw Yun Nuashing's appearance and understood that he was about to make a move again. Everyone simultaneously retreated to the side. Before leaving, the wood spirit even pulled over Qin Yin, who didn't know what was going on. Yuanxi also hurriedly ran over, wanting to pull Nightmare out. However, he saw Yin Nuashing wave his hand. After thinking for a moment, he retreated. Following the change in the eyes, the obsidian platform instantly changed color. The tens of thousands of formations were hidden within the platform. Only when Yun Nuashing used his evil spirit did he see through them. There were motionless formations that were different from the ancient times. Boom! Just as he saw the messy formations and didn't do anything, the obsidian platform suddenly shook with a boom. Nightmare, who was still lying on the platform like a worm, was thrown out by an unknown force. Yuan Shi and the others were also shocked. Their bodies swayed, and they hurriedly reached out to catch him. What's going on? Seeing Nightmare shake his head, it was as if his mind had been attacked. Yin Nuashing was also stunned. He clearly hadn't done anything yet, so why did the device activate on its own? Supporting Yuan Shi, he slowly stood up. Nightmare patted his head and then looked at the obsidian platform in shock. He was so shocked that his voice became a lot sharper. This device is about to activate. After the shock, it was followed by a burst of ecstasy. I thought this device was passed down from the ancient times and was already broken, but it can still be used. It can still be used. His fanatical look made everyone speechless. How could this guy change his expression faster than a woman's? No. Nightmare's ecstasy was still lingering on his face, but his expression changed. He said in shock, "This energy wave doesn't seem like it's used for communication. It's more like the wave of a teleportation door. Could it have been modified by someone?" Wait. As soon as he said that, Nightmare thought of something in horror. His body swayed, and he rushed toward the obsidian platform like a bolt of lightning. However, just as he moved, the obsidian platform emitted a 7-colored light that drowned the entire underground. The resplendent light was so dazzling that everyone had to cover their eyes with their hands. No, at least, wait for me to record. Before their eyes were drowned by the bright light, they heard Nightmare's hoarse scream. It was so tragic that they couldn't help but feel ashamed. While Yun Nuashing and the others closed their eyes, a gentle breeze suddenly blew against their faces. The gentle touch of the breeze caused the group's tense hearts to gradually relax. However, just as their hearts were gradually relaxing, an extremely terrifyingly high temperature rushed out like a volcanic eruption and pounced towards the crowd from all directions, causing Yin Nuashing and the others, who were caught off guard, to instantly be covered in sweat. The black light enveloped the area. Yin Nuashing looked over and faintly saw a large black flame burning fiercely within the black light. Eternal Night Flame. As Yin Nuashing glanced at the black flame, Yishi's shocked and Zai's overjoyed voices suddenly rang out. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.